Regular meeting of the Mill Creek City Council to order. Will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adrian, roll call, please.
Mayor Holtzclaw,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vignal,
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Allison,
Here.
Councilmember Duque,
Here.
and Councilmember Paddock.
Present.
We're at full strength for the first time in a few weeks. No motions to excuse. Audience communication. Anyone in the audience like to address the council? I'm seeing a nod of heads negative. Anyone on? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I looked just at Barb. Go ahead. Name and address in 3 minutes, please. I apologize.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Council Member, and the staff here. My name is David Chan. I live in Linwood. I stand before you today as an individual citizen, just like you, who care about our community. A group of us started a nonprofit organization to serve the community in Snohomish County. And we have a co-founder, Will Chan. He's a member of the City Council in Edmonds, and also another member, Ritz Khan. He's also a council member in Mugatu. For full disclosure, and for the record, I'm a fire commissioner of South County Fire, but today I'm not representing them. I speak on my own. The organization we have formed is called Asian Service Center, that we have formed just starting this year in January 1st, 2023. Ask not what Mill Creek can do for us, or we ask what we can do for you. Because Lily Brown tell you what it is, but we will have a formal inaugural ceremony on Saturday, June 3rd, 2023. It started at 10 o'clock. It will finish at 12 o'clock. We light at the beautiful Edmonds Waterfront Center with delicious Asian food, entertainment, and to celebrate. It's a fun kick off. So we are inviting all dignitaries in Snohomish County. Of course, that means all of you, the council member, and some staff in here will come. I'll just give you a brief history of why we forming this. There's an organization called Chinese Information and Service Center that's more than 50 years ago. Basically, they were helping newcomers to transition into the community. They originally were starting in International District, helping the Chinese, but eventually they expanded out to all newcomers, lately including the Ukrainians and Russians. So our goal is really follow them, able to do that. They originally look at that, there's a 23% based on the consensus of Asians American in this Snohomish County. And they felt there's a need to be here, they need the service. So they do the study and everything else, but eventually they have to not carry on because they have staff problem. They cannot expand so fast. They already have one in Bellevue already. So Will Chan called me up and say, hey, David, why don't we do it? So there's a need. So we took on this challenge, and we recruiting Edmonds Community College. There's a lot of other people helping the forming this. A lot of people asking, why are you doing this? Because we feel there's a lot of newcomer. They really need help to transition. We want to transition them to be reproductive citizen. They don't know where to get a driver license. They don't know how to get a doctor. They get all the rules and everything else. Now, most of us born and raised here have no problem, right? But our motto is basically, we don't care. You're from New York or New Delhi, we still help you. One of the inspiration, well, one of our outreach manager, because we do in preventing fire and all that. Anytime after a fire, we go into the meeting and tell them the cause of the fire and what need to be, aware of, so we don't repeat the same thing. So when she went into a apartment, but all Asian lady there, man too, and they looked at her as blank, to not understand what she's talking about. So she came back and said, Commissioner Chan, I don't know how to start. So that's gonna give me an idea that we really need to, what we call breaking the barrier and building bridges. So that's what we're here for. And so I hope every one of you can come and celebrate with us. And I think we send information, I'll get them the same invitations again. And I leave a little flyer there to celebrate. And we'll be a lot of people and just enjoying June 3rd, Saturday, start from 10 o'clock. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. And you do have a website. It's, you just Google Asian Service Center, it pulls right up. So it has more information on your website. I just pointed out that you have a website with more information. I was able to Google it very easily.
Yeah, we have a website. I was saying the website is, and anybody have been in Edmonds Community Waterfront Center?
Yeah.
It is a beautiful,
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Okay, anyone online like to address the council? Going once, twice. Okay, we'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. Move on to presentations. Martin, are you going to introduce the Food and Farming Center presentation?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor. So I have the honor to present three members of Snohomish County. Tom Deegan, the Director of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Linda Neunzig, who's the Agriculture Sector Lead for the Food and Farming Project, and Rachel Dotson, who's the Park Planning Supervisor for Snohomish County. They'll be presenting us, as I mentioned in the past, the prior council meeting, the Food and Farming Center that will be built in McCollum Park, adjacent to the city of Mill Creek. So welcome, Snohomish County members. I'll hand it over to, I believe, Linda. Is that correct?
Thank you very much. And we have a slideshow as well. Tom, did you want to say anything while they're bringing up the slideshow?
Well, I just would like to thank Mill Creek and City Council and the city manager and others for their long-term support of all kinds of initiatives that have occurred down there in the Mill Creek area and around Mill Creek. And McCollum Park is quite a hub of activity right now. We'll have 2 bus rapid transit lines through there, and we're working on other big initiatives there. So the Snohomish County Food and Farming Center, it's a very strategic location. Linda's been working hard on that, and the parks planning team have been working hard on that and generating and finding the revenue and funding to start down this path. So it's an exciting time, and we're very thankful for the opportunity to present tonight. So Linda and Rachel have to go.
Great, thank you, Tom. The Food and Farming Center is something we've been working on in Snohomish County for a very, very long time. Next slide, please, Rachel. A little background on agriculture in Snohomish County, as many of you may not be familiar with what all is happening in our industry. The exciting thing is that it's an industry that continues to grow. Agriculture in Snohomish County is the second largest sector for the county. We're just behind aerospace. The volume that is being sold each year, which we call the farm gate value, has increased year after year. The 2012 census, we were at 139 million. When the 2017 census was taken, we were at 157.5 million. We're in the midst of doing another census right now, federal census, and we expect that number to definitely have grown over the last 5 years. Interestingly enough, our cropland has also increased. We were at 29,000 acres in production. Then we went up to 33,000 acres in production. And this number is accurate due to the fact that we've done an actual windshield survey along with the Washington State Department of Agriculture so that we know what's in production, where it's been in production, and what the coming trends are around agriculture. The number of farmers has also increased. New and beginning farmers are coming to Snohomish County looking for their opportunity to farm. We've increased by 31% the number of farmers in Snohomish County. The number of farms has also increased because of the ability to come to Snohomish County and farm with a tremendous amount of support, with regulations that really support farming, agritourism, and the many things that go around it, has made an enormous difference in how our farmers farm. Next slide, please. A number of years ago, we went out to the farmers and said, what can we do to help you to be economically viable in Snohomish County as farmers? We want to make sure that we are giving them every bit of support that we possibly can so they can continue farming. And there was a lot of different things in there, and we've accomplished everything that they've asked for. We are now down to the last three things: processing, distribution, aggregation, commercial kitchen, and a year-round farmers market. These things are important because regulations that have come down now, such as the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is definitely needed, makes it too expensive for a farmer to actually put this processing unit on their farms. Or, as many farms are, they're located in the floodplain, which wouldn't allow that to happen. So building a processing distribution site that allow farmers to bring their product to one location, have it processed, and then it all goes out from there. So instead of having, let's say, 50 different farmers on the road driving their product to Seattle, where the vast majority of it is sold, you now have one truck on the road to Seattle doing everybody's distribution, and that farmer can be back on the farm farming. The commercial kitchen, value-added products like you see on the screen right here, those require a licensed kitchen to be able to process it into something that can be sold year-round. Jams, jellies, all those things, they have to have the right kind of a kitchen to be able to do it. A good example of this would be, let's say I have strawberries, and they're the best strawberries you've ever had, but they're only ripe for a month and a half out of the year. If I could take those strawberries and I could turn them into strawberry jam, then I would have strawberry jam to sell year round. I could sell it in grocery stores because it's been processed the right way in a commercial kitchen, or maybe I sell that in a farmer's market. But not only does it increase the amount of income for that farmer, it also spreads that income out 12 months out of the year. We all enjoy going to farmers markets, right? They're the best place to go. It's a community. It's the best food you can find. It's talking to the farmers. But as we all know, it's a very limited time frame when we can go to the farmers markets. Farmers grow specifically for that season. Once the markets close down, there really isn't a market for them to be able to sell at, so they stop growing. But what if we went in the wintertime and we could have a cup of coffee and we could go through and we could buy fresh bread, we could buy all kinds of greens, and farmers were able to extend their growing season later into the fall and start earlier in the spring. And a lot of our farmers have hoop houses and greenhouses, which would allow year-round production. A year-round farmers market would not only be opportunistic for the farmers, but it's great for the community. Next slide, please. McCollum Park is really the perfect spot. There really could not be a place, and we looked for years to think of where is the best place for this to go that has an opportunity for farmers to easily get to, whether they're I-5, maybe they're Highway 2, maybe they're Highway 9, maybe they're going to come down from Whatcom County or Skagit County. Where's an easy place for them to get to without having to jump off I-5? The more we looked, we realized that that spot was right in front of us. It's county-owned property. So it works perfect. And then we think about the consumers and where they're going to be located and where's the best opportunity for them to be able to shop. We've got transit lines there. We've got the light rail coming in. We've got the urban core sub area right there. But then we've also, right across the freeway there, you've got a food desert. With that food desert, the lack of fresh local food is huge. And if we can get food to them that we know is nutritious, that is easily accessible, that's the best we can do right there. Let's get the food from the farmers to those that need it best. Next, please. So where on McCollum Park do we build this? Well, we've got some great spots located. Where the pool is will become the year-round farmers market. It's easily accessible right off of 128th. You can see it right there. There's lots of parking. It's the perfect spot. But the processing and distribution side, that can go in a different area. That can go down where the WSU buildings are currently, in front of the Stream Center. We were originally going to rehab those two buildings, and that would be the processing commercial kitchen area. But unfortunately, those buildings have lived their life. They're older buildings that are beyond being able to be turned into something else. So we will construct a new building that's going to go there that will house both. That'll be phase one. Phase two of the project will be the year-round farmers market. Next, please. So this is just a rough sketch of what it could look like, what it may look like. So this is just an example of a farmers market that they have up in Calgary. That's a year-round indoor farmers market. To the left, you can see a schematic of what the processing, distribution, commercial kitchen would look like. The flow, and I apologize, there's horses weaning in the background. Hopefully everybody can't hear that. The trucks will pull in, product will come out at the dock. It then goes into the processing center where it'll be washed, sliced, diced, maybe it's frozen, and it can be bundled up and go right back out to food banks, distribution centers throughout the area, or maybe it goes into that commercial kitchen. They then go into there and they become value-added products. That's where those strawberries would go to become strawberry jam, or maybe they're my favorite strawberry tart. From there, they can then go directly to the distribution center again to be able to be distributed that way. They could go to the year-round market, or they can be frozen and ready for when you need them. Next slide, please. We've been working with the Salmon Safe organization. This project will be certified Salmon Safe. We're going through that process right now. It will also be LEED Gold certified. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rachel, and she'll take you through the next steps.
All right, thanks, Linda. So hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Dotson. I am a landscape architect and the park planning supervisor here at Snohomish County Parks. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the process that we're going to use to complete this project and where we are in the timeline. In 2022, we decided to use the progressive design build method to deliver this project. And just in case you're not familiar with the progressive design build method, I have two different diagrams here to explain the difference between progressive design build and the traditional method, which most entities use to deliver projects throughout Washington State. It's design bid build. So I'll start with that one. You would typically start with a procurement process, a competition through an RFP or RFQ to hire an engineering firm, architects, and all the specialty designers. And then you would start contract number one with that design team. They would take you through design, public outreach, and permitting. And then you would send the construction documents through a public bid process to hire the contractor. And so then you would go into construction with that contractor on board. And so the contractor represents your second overall contract or set of contracts. So you're managing 2 overall sets of contracts. With progressive design build, this process builds in a lot of efficiencies, time efficiencies and cost efficiencies. So we'll start with a procurement process to hire a progressive design build contractor who will bring on the designers and the engineers under them. And so we overall have 1 contract with the contractor, and then they have subcontracts with the designers. And then we would still go through public process, design. We'd still be able to review the design as we typically would. Oftentimes we can start to stack design and construction and start to find some time efficiencies when construction is happening while the design is finishing up. And then, as you can see here, what often happens with progressive design build is the projects finish up a lot faster than using design bid build. And so some other efficiencies that are built into this beyond the accelerated project schedule, there's a lot more collaboration with the contractor and the designers. At a certain point in this design process, they will set what is called a maximum price. So we'll know early on in the design what this project is going to cost when construction is complete. And that way we have a lot more control throughout construction on the overall end price. And then, so that process in and of itself helps to reduce those change orders during construction. The one big difference here is that we do eliminate that public bid process. And because we are eliminating that, we do have to go to the state's project review committee and ask them for permission to do the progressive design build delivery method. So we are planning to do that in June, and anticipating that they will grant us permission to do that. So for the overall timeline, we've completed site selection at McCollum Park and an initial feasibility study to make sure that this facility will work at McCollum. We started to engage a steering committee, and that coordination and outreach is going to be ongoing through the design process. We've also hired an owner's rep who brings expertise in progressive design build, and they're going to help guide us through that process because this is Snohomish County Parks' first project going through the progressive design build process. And we officially kicked off the project in January. Okay, and then here is a basic timeline for getting to a complete facility. So we're going to focus 2023 on seeking additional grant funding opportunities. We're working through consultant selection. We are anticipating that in January of 2024, we'll have our design builder on board and we can start kicking off the design. And then in the summer, we're working through several site studies at McCollum. So we'll have a surveyor out there, we'll have a geotechnical engineer and some environmental consultants doing studies on the site, just to give us a really good understanding of the permitting requirements and how we can navigate around some of the constraints out there at the site. Then we should be kicking off design and permitting through 2024, ending that about mid-2025. We'll have ongoing stakeholder outreach through that whole process. And if everything goes really well, we'll get to construction in 2025 and that around late 2026 and have closeout and opening of the facility in early 2027. It is entirely possible that we'll be able to find some efficiencies there and have it open sooner, but we're going to have to see how things progress. And then just to be very clear, Snohomish County is not planning on being the operator of this facility in the end. So right around mid next year, we'll start to go out for an RFP process to get operators on board to eventually operate the facility. And so with that, I'll hand it back to Linda.
There we go. Okay, so we've been pretty successful in our funding so far. This year, we received 1.5 million in ARPA funding. In the 2023 state budget, we've got 2.5 million for the 2023 budget. The Snohomish County put in $3,025,012. And then we have a HUD grant that we received from congressional direct spending through Congresswoman Delbenny's office for $750,000. So we've got $7,775,000 already in hand to do the project. We've also put in a congressional direct spending request through Congresswoman Delbenny's office again for $5 million, and she's moved that request forward to committee. So fingers crossed we also receive those funds. Because we're doing this phased, this will give us enough money to complete phase 1, processing, distribution, aggregation, and commercial kitchen. And those costs are including all of the equipment that would go in them so that they then become turnkey leases. Next. We've had some tremendous partners in this. Washington State University, Economic Alliance, Snohomish County, obviously Washington State Department of Agriculture, the state director has been extremely supportive. Washington State Department of Commerce, the Northwest Agriculture Business Center, which you may not be familiar with, it is a multi-county organization supporting farmers, and CDFA, which came out and did an original study for us probably 3 years ago on the site and would it work for this project, which they said it definitely would and help to support us in that as well. And with that, if you have any questions, we would be happy to take them. Obviously, we're excited about it, so anxious to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm sure there will be some questions. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor. What an absolutely fabulous project. Thanks for presenting it. I had no idea when I saw it on tonight's agenda of how deep this was down the road. My question is what is the plan for if Snohomish County is going to get out of the business of operating this? What is the plan for funding it? Is that entirely based on grant and perpetuity?
It'll be a turnkey lease. So each of those facilities, of the 3 facilities on there, will be a lease. Snohomish County will not operate any of the 3 businesses.
And the last question I have is that far left that you had on the map, that far left property, does that come onto the city of Mill Creek's area, or the Public Works Director is saying no? The reason I would ask is because we would have to probably amend code for use, I would think, if that were the case.
Any other questions? No. Any questions?
Say, I shouldn't have jumped in, but I think that the far left, you're referring to our aerial of McCollum Park, and that's where the old WSU Extension Center was, and it's where the Northwest Stream Center is, I believe. We should get Rachel or Tom Donaghy's head too. I think I've got that right.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember, so go ahead, Vince.
No, my question was probably, so that's not on Mill Creek's territory, right? That's still in county property, McCollum. Oh, thank you.
Councilmember Duque.
Hi, I really appreciate the presentation, and I also appreciated, I've been keeping an eye on the information that came out about the pool, and I really like the language that you guys had on the website about declaring why it's not happening, and then of course talking about this project. But I didn't realize that the Adopt a Stream Foundation Center would be part of that. So does that mean they're going to be looking for a new location? No, they'll still be there, just new building? Or
They're
part
staying,
of the building?
Yeah, they're staying in their existing building, so those are going to be out in front of that. And quite honestly, we're still looking at and working with our design build group on whether or not there's two separate building areas or whether or not you elongate that and do a longer building kind of where the pool is. But we're researching that. There's opportunities to do both. So clearly we're trying to do the best layout, obviously, for functionality, but also the least expensive we can possibly do and
Absolutely.
make that happen. So
No, that makes sense, because when you said, or when it was said in the presentation about being in front, I got confused, because I do remember there's some parking in front of kind of that little, where the trees are, that little like buffer before it gets to the main loop. I do use this park regularly for walks. And so that's why I was like, I don't think that's large enough, but maybe you were talking about then hitting into the actual field. And so that's why I was trying to determine, but you're still in that phasing part. So that makes sense to me about that, and I appreciate it. It also looked like in your phases, obviously there's phase one, which has to do with the processing and, and getting those buildings together. And then later, how that looks to get the year-round farmers market. What do you kind of anticipate the gap in between one being opened, the first phase, versus then when phase two? And I guess my question related, to see if that answers it, is there kind of a plan of, we have the phase one, it's going, we're having farmers there, and then can there be like a tour of local cities that would have farmers markets that kind of preview what the year-round one would have? Or looking for like locations for, if there's buildings that aren't being leased currently in different cities, to be able to house that kind of pop-up farmers market?
I'm not completely sure I got your question straight. So are you thinking of a?
My question is, after phase one is complete,
Mhm.
and you have you have people already in there and being able to do all the fantastic things that you're talking about, but there's not, although they have other options wherever they came from in terms of selling, but there's not a year round.
No.
And the year round will still take time. Is there any plans for what can be done in the local area to kind of promote that this is coming? That this is coming.
Sure. We've talked about in the past, but COVID has definitely gotten in the way of doing some pop-up markets out there in the summertime, just to start building that awareness that there would be a market there at some point. We have not looked to doing an empty building and doing a year-round market at this time. We really do take all of our guidance from the farmers, because they're the ones that would be producing for it. All three of these components are directed by the agriculture community, and they are our steering committee that help direct us. With the indoor market, it's something that they need to plan for, because they will have to switch up their growing practices, whether it's putting more land into production, which we hope will happen. That's one of the goals. It's about protecting the farmer, which means protecting the farmland. So the more opportunities they have to put land into production, the better. So it's going to take about a year for them to work into their existing business plan, the growing for an additional market like this.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Linda.
Councilmember Paddock.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, the update. I had two questions. One is, who's comprised in the steering committee? Who participates in that? And what's their role?
Farmers.
100%.
100%, because they are the end users. We are building this at their request, and they know exactly what it is that they need. And they have told us repeatedly. And so we take our directions from them to make sure that what we build fits their needs. We don't want to just go say, hey, we built a processing center, or hey, we're building a year-round market. We need to build it so that it fits their needs. So they are actively involved in all of the design process.
Great, that's really good to hear. And then the second one, I might not have done my math correctly or did not hear you correctly. It sounds like phase one is about a $13 million endeavor. Is that right? There's 7 in the bank now and another 5 to get phase one completed.
Right.
And that's the processing center?
And commercial kitchen.
Okay. And then 29 for the rest? for the 29 million for the farmer's market and the rest?
Now you're out of my realm. I'll hand that to Tom or Rachel.
Yeah, we've actually been looking around the country at some of the more prolific markets and markets that have done very well, both in, you know, high density urban settings as well as more a bit suburban settings. And yes, to have a functional year-round market that draws substantially, that's the ballpark we're in. That's kind of what we're looking at. And I would caution that we're still, again, we're in the design build, you know, that whole program, which is great because it's giving us a chance to talk to a lot of people. Linda's right. It starts with the farmers. It starts with our ag community working forward. Then we get into kind of the business side of that. What does it look like? How do you build out a market that's both, you know, really fun and enjoyable to be at, as well as, you know, has all the things that you're looking for year round. And does it, you know, it's not an event center. It's not all these, there's all these things have come up in the last 2.5 years of doing this. The reality is, I think we've got some flexibility. And at this point, we haven't even determined, honestly, on the site, whether you go with one larger building, one longer building that, you know, encompasses the pool and goes to the south from there. That may be the best setup. It may be even done in phases, but inside of one structure. So that's where we're really excited to be doing this design build portion, because there's an opportunity to look at efficiency, aesthetics, use pattern, and kind of build in all three phases of what we want to do, but as we start into construction. So there's still lots of work to be done, but it's exciting to be, you know, at this point, and we felt like it was certainly time to bring in our Mill Creek partners, and a lot of other folks, again, in the county have very strong interest in this.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that as well, that we have done multiple feasibility studies on that site and making sure that putting the farmers market there is the right place for it to go to be able to reach the most number of people. When you've got farmers coming to a farmers market, you've got this balancing act you have to do. You have to get the farmers there, but they have to be able to make enough money where it's worth their time to leave the farm and go to a market. So you have to have the right mix of people to show up that will spend the money that make it worth that farmer's time. And with the transit station there, it all works out perfectly. We've got the sizing down through those feasibility studies, and all of our feasibility studies were done using community attributes.
Thank you. Looks like a great project.
Councilmember Steckler.
I just had two questions. One I think has already been answered, but just wanted to confirm. So your estimated completion date of early 2027, that includes phase 2 as well, correct?
That does not.
Oh, okay. We were talking about the money. That's what I wanted to know. So do you have an estimated completion time for phase 2, the indoor facility?
If the funding were in place, it could be another 2 years after that. It could go much faster if we went progressive design build again, but it kind of does depend on whether we have the funding in place for phase 2.
So the indoor facility, we're probably looking at 2029 for that one, correct? 2 years.
I think that's a safer assumption. I think right now we've got a number of our federal legislators as well as state legislators are very interested in it. They'd like to see something like this go. You know, and I think I'll be honest, we've had a number of projects recently that kind of seemed impossible maybe 15 years ago. Meadowdale Beach, getting that from a 5.5 foot, you know, tunnel under the tracks of BNSF into a 110-foot trestle now with all the salmon recovery and everything else. Kind of embolden us to try to say, okay, what is possible? How quickly can we do this? How do we get co-investments by federal and state and others? And again, I've been doing this now 40 years professionally, and I have to say it's the first time I've been able to ever have BNSF actually participate in a project and actually build a structure. And yes, we paid for it, but I hadn't ever had that happen anywhere I've been. So we're feeling like, okay, with a really good idea in a really great space, where especially long-term, as you get the 2 bus rapid transit lines, yes, they're done. We're in the mix, but now you're going to have light rail. You're going to have a lot of other development along the I-5 spine. It's a great place to get all your agricultural products to. pretty easily from very fertile lands, very close by, and move that product out quickly where there's a lot of people that are going to be looking for it. It's kind of like, this actually makes so much sense that it's hard to not do. So that's where we are, and we're going to be as aggressive as we possibly can, and we'll keep you all up to date as we hopefully have successes.
That's great. My second question ties in also with funding as well with the indoor facility. Will this be exclusively at this time? Is your plan to make it exclusively farmers products, or will it also include other products like crafts and that type of thing?
There's a formula. There's a formula that you use depending upon the time of year and the amount of produce that is there. It will be agricultural product based, definitely. And, you know, there's always going to be a little bit of a mix in there, but this is about food. This is about farmers, and it's about keeping local food local and keeping our farmers farming. Does that mean you can't buy a trinket there or some really cool local art? Sure you can, but it is not a craft fair. This is about farmers, period.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Takei.
I just love hearing all of you speak about this and your passion for it. It just makes me very excited for it. I had a question, I assume for Rachel, and it has to do with the playground equipment and then also the other fields that are there. The impact moving forward, I would assume that there would be, because of how long this process will be, there's still a priority of making sure that playground and those grounds are available for all of the residents that use them, correct?
Yes, we are planning a master plan process for the whole park shortly after this project is done. But in the meantime, we have a playground replacement project scheduled for, I think, 2027. So it should be right after this is built.
Fantastic. I just wanted that, video assurance of that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Well, thank you again for the presentation. We look forward to watching as the project progresses in the years to come.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Representative Donaghy. In light of the fact that we have a guest, is there any objection if we alter the legislative update and do that now and then get to the shopping carts? Okay, so I might turn it over to Martin or Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess you want me to tee it off? Mayor Pro Tem.
Maybe, do we have the,
Yes. I'll bring up the PowerPoint. Joe, those.
I've got one too.
No.
Thank you, City Manager. As we are starting to pull up the slideshow, we have invited Rep. Donaghy here tonight as part of our discussion of what the Legislative Committee has been working on so that she can give us an update on what they have been working on in the legislature this session. So, and now they're good. I was like, now it just told me I had to relog back in. So, somewhere here, we have a slide to introduce Brandy. There we go. So as you may or may not know, we're working with the Legislative District 44. We have Senator John Lovick and Representatives April Berg, who will be here on the 23rd, I believe. She couldn't be here tonight, and Representative Brandy Donaghy. Brandy is a Navy veteran, community educator and organizer and volunteer. She does serve on a number of local and regional boards and committees, and is trustee of her church. She is vice chair of both the Transportation Committee, if you guys have any questions for her about transportation tonight, and the Innovation, Community Economic Development and Veterans Committee, and member of Consumer Protection and Business Committee. And we want to thank her for her time to start us off tonight and just give us a recap of what's important to her, what's going on, what was going on this session, what's still going on. And thank you for your time and for coming in here tonight. Yes, please.
Nobody ever gives us podiums. We just have to stand at our desks most of the time. Okay, so I'm happy to be here and I appreciate your invitation. My tendency is to really like to answer your questions as opposed to just starting off talking in all directions, because my job is to do the things that are important to you. And the best way to make sure that I'm doing that is to hear from you on what's most important. So, okay, don't lean on the podium. Surprise. I will also caution you that I been out of town for the last week. I got in really, really early this morning. So I'll ask for a little bit of grace there. Bear with me. I do have some notes. So I understand there were a few things that were really important. You had your capital projects, pursuits. There were concerns about Blake and a number of other things. So I'm happy to tell you where we are on those things. And if you would like to direct which way we go first, I'd be amenable to that.
Would you like me, we have like a recap of laid out of like some of the bills we were following and then some other presentations. Do you want us to go ahead and go through that? And then you can kind of just jump in with your insights and answer questions as to each one as they go along. Will that work for everybody? Everybody's good with that? All right, perfect. Thank you. We had a number of key bills that we've been reviewing this session, and we brought many of those to the council as we were following along with those. If you would give me a minute, because now it is telling me I need to continue. I have to log back into the internet. I need the bill. Yeah, I need the handout document real quick. If you can pull that up for me. I found it, but if you want to. Okay. It's okay. I found it. So what we did was we kind of went through and we just kind of did just a quick summary, because we know we just wanted to give an upper level recap for everyone of the things that we're bringing to you that we worked on this legislative session. So one was the Public Works Assistance Account, and that was funded. We were advocating along with AWC that was funded. We were advocating for some public records reforms because of problems of potential misuse regarding the current law, and that is on hold. So nothing went forward with that one. We also were advocating for funding of DRCC properties, and we were successful in getting $1.03 million in the budget, and also funding in City Hall North for some improvements of the HVAC units and replacing the HVAC system and the roof. And we were able to get $515,000 for that. And we are very appreciative. And so then as we move on, we had, there it is. So everybody else can follow along, because we just did a upper level recap of this for everyone, and it should be in the packet that was online as well. So concerning vehicle pursuits, Senate Bill 5352, Councilmember Allison was monitoring this one. So I don't know if Representative Donaghy has anything to speak to that. We had closely monitored it, and we supported clarification around the ability for law enforcement to conduct effective and safe vehicle pursuits using a reasonable suspicion standard in specific circumstances. So I'm not sure, that was one of the ones that we were following. If you wanted to add anything on that.
Essentially with that one, it did come up against a couple of roadblocks. We did expand what is allowed for the pursuits to try to make things a little bit easier and work on clarification. Do you recognize it's probably going to be an ongoing process that each year we're going to end up hearing from people who want us to keep tweaking things in order to keep getting things into that perfect spot where we're minimizing the danger to the public while also allowing our law enforcement to do their job. And that is a very careful balance. And so that is something I think we're going to keep working on as time goes on. However, we did get feedback from law enforcement that they were generally more pleased with where we landed this year than they had been before. So hopefully that kind of coordination will continue and we'll be able to get to a really good spot. But if there's anything specific that you want to know about that, or
Oh, no, does anyone have any questions on that? Everybody's okay? All right. And then also, the big elephant in the room, we were following, we were concerned about the 5536 concerning controlled substance, counterfeit substances and legend drug possession and treatment. And we closely followed this, and ultimately there was not an agreement that came. I know that you are being called into special session.
Yep.
We have worked and put out our own statement that we strongly support the state coming up with a solution. And it's really important to us that whatever that solution is, that funding is in there for requirements that may be placed upon the cities as well. That's really important to us. So do you have any insight to add on that one?
well, first of all, we were called back into special session on the 16th. We'll see how that goes. I know there's already Four Corners work happening, so it's the leadership in the Democratic and Republican caucuses in both bodies that are working together to try to find a solution. Ultimately, I'm going to say I agree that it does need to be a state solution, and the reason is because we can provide that funding. When it comes down to it, it shouldn't be the responsibility of all the localities to be able to pay for all the treatment options and everything else, because the reality is that a lot don't have that money. And so as a state, we have a responsibility to make sure we're funding those pieces that need to happen in order to get things done. So I'm very hopeful and that we're going to come to a solution, and I think we very well may fairly quickly.
Oh, that's good news. Does anybody, this one is one that there may be some questions.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Representative Donaghy. Thank you for running for office and doing your job as representative. And thank you for your service to our nation. I don't think we say that quite enough. I was going to touch on all of the legislative law and justice bills that did or did not pass in this past session. But I think what's the most concerning, and I think the Mayor Pro Tem called it the elephant in the room, was Blake. That essentially the session was punted again. And I have to say I'm disappointed because I'm not comfortable at the notion of a special session. We've gone through this almost, this would be the third year running here. So I'm disappointed that more on both sides aren't speaking up. I know some stopgaps were brought to the attention of the legislative body, and it was party line vote, and this can't happen. There is carnage in our streets now. 108,000 of our citizens lost their lives last year with overdose. 2.59 of all deaths in America are overdose deaths. And we're allowing these things to be legally possessed while this capricious void, it still exists. And we're stuck in the middle of it. We as a city, at least, I'm proud of every council member up here. At least we put a law in place. We made it a gross misdemeanor. We did something about it. We gave our cops the tools, and we can tell the public, look them in the eye, that we're doing something about this scourge, and we're all facing it. I get it, but I don't have confidence in a special session. We've already had that discussion. I just want to know why you guys punted.
So a couple things. First, this is the first special session since 2017. So
And wait, and
we
that's
haven't gotten there.
sorry, that's unfair to you because this is your first year on here. So
Yeah, it's my
when I
second
say
year.
you, it's legislative
And,
body. Thank you.
yeah, but this is actually the first special session we've had since 2017. I'm not sure punting is the right word because we brought it to the floor and it failed. We passed it out of the House. It went to the Senate. The Senate passed a different bill and we had to bring it back. There was a conference committee. There was work together to get it done. We brought it to the House floor again, and that's where it failed. So we were trying to get something done. There is technically still that law, all those laws in place until the 1st
Of July.
of July, which is a good thing. But I agree, we can't let it become a situation where there's nothing there. We can't. It's not good for us. It's not good for the people who have substance abuse problems, and it's not good for our law enforcement. I mean, it's not good all around. So I do think we are going to get somewhere. I think we have to get somewhere because it's our job to get there. And I'm hoping that when we do, it will be a situation that everybody can come out and feel a little bit better about. Because I think sometimes we end up in a situation where nobody's happy, but it's the best we can do. And I'm hoping we do better this time.
And I totally agree. And we all want to get to the same space, right? We want those that want access to treatment to get it, and those that need to go to jail to go to jail. You just can't, and I'm not saying, when I say you, I'm speaking about the legislative body. You just can't put the handcuffs on the cities. I'm currently working with Councilmember Nearing for the county on a county code regarding drug possession. So we're trying to do something. We can't have the city trying to, the state trying to assert preeminence later on. And again, I still don't have any idea why we're having this discussion 2.5 years into this.
They put a fix in place. The fix was not necessarily what needed to happen. And that's how we got here. I'm not sure that anyone was actually expecting the results from the Supreme Court. So I can kind of understand the need to scramble, but again, it's something that has to get fixed. It has to get fixed now. And I really think that it needs to be the state that fixes it, because we're able to provide more resources to make sure that everybody can do their job, to keep every community safe, to keep everybody who wants help to climb out of substance abuse or substance addiction to be able to do that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your candor. Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's more that you want to have a conversation about offline, I'm more than happy to do that too. I don't want to take up the entire evening.
Exactly. Me either.
But
Thank you.
we can totally talk more if you want.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have any questions on this one? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now we're moving into some of the housing bills that I was following. So House Bill 1110 was the increasing middle housing in areas traditionally dedicated to single family detached housing. This one was really contentious. We as a committee, actually, we sent in letters for testimony, and we really advocated for the city on this, for maintaining our local control. Ultimately, I think that we were a little successful because there were some changes, but ultimately, this one did pass. So I'm not sure if anyone has any questions regarding this one. I saw Councilmember Duque reach over already. So maybe she has some questions.
Not a question. Hi, Representative Donaghy. I like saying that. It's not a question, but as we're talking about these things, and we didn't open up to the earlier ones, but I just wanted to focus that these were all items that we had on our legislative agenda. And so these were based off of what our priorities were. These were the ones we were following. And so what was really important about this one was that we just, we really feel about maintaining local control, because we know what resources we have and what our city looks like, and our, talking to our residents. And so just wanting to flag that in terms of this, whatever future housing bills come up while you're there, just thinking about how the impact that this has, that there's not like a one size fits all when it comes to these types of growth plans. And as we work towards what our planning looks like, which we have to do, it's thinking about that. And it's some of the language that I think we were concerned about had to do with, size of our city. And then of course, whether we're part of a certain urban area and the proximity to things, but while we might be close, we're still, that we are not as large, or we don't have that type. So same as kind of mentioned before, when it comes to funding, when there are these kind of requests or impacts that, you know, or things that will impact us, it's really important to make sure that we have funding associated to be able to do whatever the studies are to figure out what that looks like, to get these things done. So that's what I just wanted to flag about this one.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. One of the good points about a lot of the housings, things that we've seen come through is that they allow for things without necessarily requiring them to happen. Like nobody's going to go through and just start plowing down single family homes to build. So it should provide for rather slow growth as opposed to something that's on top of things. But what you're saying is really important. We need to make sure that there's also the infrastructure there to support everything that's coming in. That's actually one of the things that I tend to focus on is infrastructure resiliency. I do it often from a disaster standpoint, but it still rings true. You need to make sure that you have enough of all of the necessary services for all of your communities, as well as all the new people you're bringing in. And so that is something that I do tend to focus on. I'm not on a housing committee, but that is something that I tend to push my colleagues on fairly regularly, because we can't just keep building houses and not grocery stores and clinics and schools and everything else to meet that growth.
Any questions on that one?
On house bills or other things?
Well, if it's gonna be on House bills in general, if you want to let me talk about the next one, and then you can, and then you can wait, because they're kind of linked, really. We followed, Senate Bill 5466, that I think it passed the Senate, but when it went to the House, it did not move further. We also sent in letters and testimony regarding this bill. And this one was promoting transit-oriented development, and really something that's really important to us, because I think this one ultimately failed. I think as a council, we need to be prepared that this will come back in another form, in my opinion. So we need to be ready to advocate for whatever that form is next year for what we want, because we advocate for changes to the required mandated level of transit-oriented density as it was defined at each station area, because our bus stops along 527 should not be required the same density and treated the same as by light rail. It's just not the same. The infrastructure is not this, is just not there. They shouldn't be treated the same. The purpose isn't the same. And ultimately, we've got feeder, we're a feeder to get to light rail. That doesn't mean that we have the capacity to have the housing density right there on top of our bus stops. So it just didn't make sense. So ultimately that one didn't move forward and failed, but I feel very strongly that it will be back in some form or another next year.
I'm
So
sure it will, but that argument that you're making is one that we keep hearing, and I think it does have an impact on whether or not this passes overall.
perfect. So now, Councilmember Stickler, if you had any questions about housing bills, that was the two that we were really focused on.
I just had a question for you outside of the bill. So I was looking at the bio on you and a number of the committees that you head up and are involved with and such. And so what I'm interested in is grants and opportunities to fund some of our projects and that we've got going on here. And I know that our wonderful state treasurers and his team have had a very good, successful year, investments and returns. And so financially, our state has got some good coffers to put back into form of some of the grants that the state is looking at. And I was wondering, with some of these, like innovation and community economic development, do you head up a certain number of grant opportunities that we could be looking at that specifically you or your committee we could apply for, should be considering, or should have?
Typically, the grants are going to be with the agencies. And so like we can help support the agencies that offer the grants. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So in a lot of cases, that's how it works. Even when you're looking at transportation projects, it's very often, sometimes the transportation committee will put projects in space, but sometimes it's grants based that are distributed by the Department of Transportation. So it all kind of goes through there. A lot of the innovation and community development stuff is through the Department of Commerce.
So is there any way, any role that you might play that we could reach out to you in advance, or any information that you could provide to us in advance that could help us?
If there are things you need, just let me know and I'll see what
Okay.
I can do.
So send you,
Yeah.
reach out to you with a list of what we need specifically.
Yep, because that's my job.
Okay, all right,
Tell me what you need and I'll work on making sure it happens.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So I think overall, that was our main focus. We have a few other things minor things that were in here. So did anyone have any other questions for Rep. Donaghy? Because I think after this, we start to delve into things that we thought worked as a legislative committee and what didn't, and just kind of like what our thoughts were of the overall process. So Sean. Oh, sorry. Was Melissa first?
I was, but happy to go to Councilmember Paddock.
Excuse me, if we're going to wrap up this part of the session, I do want to thank you for your advocacy and support of the grants we did get this year. I believe it was about $1.5 million to help rehabilitate the City Hall North and to get us started on the DRCC property. So thank you, and Representative Burr and Senator Levick for doing that. Thank you very much.
We asked you a lot of questions about the things that were important to us, but I'd love to hear about anything that we didn't discuss already that you worked on or that you were excited about, that or things that maybe surprised you or anything like that when it came to your time this year as our representative.
You know what? I will tell you about my favorite bill that I passed this session. It kind of went under the radar. I didn't get a lot of emails about it or anything else, which was interesting, but it was a bill to create a resiliency program under the Department of the Military. That's where emergency management lives. And so a lot of other agencies have resiliency programs. Ecology has them, has one, health, whole bunch of them. Some of them are kind of heavily focused on climate change, but it seemed odd that the organization that actually responds to disasters in our state did not have one. So the idea is to allow them to analyze where we are, what needs to be done in case of a major disaster, so that we can start investing in the right places to make sure that we can keep Washingtonians safe and alive when we do have a major earthquake. We're overdue for a mega quake. The Cascadia subduction zone brings a lot of, could bring a lot of danger to the area. We're talking tsunami, 9.0 earthquake. And there's a lot we can do to help people if we get out of it. And so one of the things that I do try to focus on is that when it comes to every other piece of legislation as well, is making sure that there's always infrastructure that will allow everybody to be more resilient. I'm really excited about that bill because I think it has the potential to save hundreds of thousands of Washingtonian lives. But it is something that I'm going to keep pushing for. So every session, you're going to see some kind of resilience or disaster preparedness legislation from me that I'm going to be trying to get through so I can keep everybody safe, because that's a place where we are far behind. And so if anybody has any projects that they're interested in that relate to that, please let me know. The Innovation, Community, Economic Development and Veterans Committee is where emergency preparedness lives when it comes to legislature. So.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing it.
Thank you. Did anyone else have any further questions? Thank you so much for coming in here to meet with us tonight. And we're looking forward to building the relationship and being able to work with you more as we move forward and continue this process. And if you want to hang out and watch what the rest of our recap, if you, in case we have questions, you're more than welcome to, or if you don't want to, you don't have to. So
Oh, no, I'm
thank
already
you for-
here. You're stuck with me.
thank you
Um,
for coming in and thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. And again, anybody has any questions, concerns, anything they want to talk about, let me know.
Oh, yeah,
Not
that's a
at
great idea.
Yeah, I'll be hanging out.
Oh, wait, no, we'll do it right now.
Hmm?
You have a standard kind of format, we put you in the middle of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we decide we want a picture and we just do it. So.
Cool.
Plug on trees and papers, no?
Yeah. I know.
I was getting back.
Thank you for coordinating your work. Yeah, got those blue blazers, man, they're fun.
Not like last week when almost everybody was in white. So, okay, so let's, we did the bill recap. There's a thing, do we want to have any discussion on city impact on the bills that we followed? City manager? Yeah, I need this.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to, if anybody had any questions or concerns about the impact that these bills would have on our, directly on our city operations or something that we may need to carry forward or anything of that sort. There may be some questions on vehicle pursuits, the impact that it may have on our existing operations, or even we already have, I think, an understanding of how the Blake bill is going to impact this going forward. And there may be a need to understand kind of where we are in the planning process, if that's a concern as well. But we've already been thinking forward on the Blake bill and moving forward with that and addressing what we're going to do moving forward. So when things converge at some point in time before, well before the 1st of July, we'll be ready. So vehicle pursuits, if anyone has concerns, we can comment about that as well. But I think it's pretty clear kind of how the housing bills are going to affect us and what we need to carry over. So, and we'll have another shot at this too, as we start or commence the process for 2024 in probably June. To bring these back, because I'm sure we're going to need another recap of kind of where we are, what goes back on that bill tracking sheet, so we can track. But we want to revisit whether it went dead or it passed and needs to be revised. So we may want to go back on the agenda page to give an overview of kind of what else we have the rest of the.
Yeah, and I think
If that helps.
Councilmember Duque has a question real quick.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I really appreciate all of staff and being proactive in this entire process. And I know we're going to talk about what works, best and as we continue. But your response right now about that, we're already communicating, we're already working through it, we'll be prepared. It's very reassuring. And I just applaud all of you and your hard work on this. So thank you for just being on top of it that way.
Well, thanks to our city clerk who's taking the lead on this.
And also, let's thank the committee. They dedicated a bunch more time on getting together and staying on top of these bills within the House and communicating with the legislature. So good job all around. And just be mindful, this is our first year at this endeavor. So, it's going to be a little painful at first, but I think we got through it just fine. And I see nothing but good things. Good job, everyone.
Thank you. So what we did was we got together after the session ended as a committee, and staff got together and came up with some things that they want to do we want to come back with you to council and just kind of give you an update of what we thought our successes were, what we thought we were excited about that we felt went well, what we felt, well, this is kind of, needs a little help. That it needs a little improving, and also kind of get some feedback from you on what, if there's something you'd like to see or something you felt like you wish had worked differently or anything like that. So to start off, can we move to the next slide real quick? Yeah, that one, successful. So we start off, we had a very successful first year. I felt like we formed our legislative committee, and Councilmember Decay, Councilmember Allison, and I met with staff multiple times. We established a legislative agenda and brought to you late last year for approval, so that we actually had a set of priorities that were important to us that we wanted to advocate for. We met with legislators and told them what those priorities were and what was going on in our city, and how things were working, so they knew what we needed. And so we built some collaboration with our legislators, between council and staff and the legislators as well, on some of the things that we were looking for. We also were really strong at supporting some of our positions, and also defending some of our positions for things that we did not want. So I was very proud of us for the work we did on staying on top of that and actually sending letters in for testimony this year. And so that we were being, letting it be known where we stood and what we wanted. And once again, that resulted in us securing 1.5 million in grants for City Hall and DRCC. And that took a lot of work and collaboration with the legislature to make sure that happened. So those were all great successes that we had. And then can I have the next slide? Oop, that went backwards. So for us, some things that worked is that we did meet with our legislators. I'll put a caveat on that because it's going to be on the next slide too, that because we ended up deciding so late, the mayor and I met with the legislators, with city manager and deputy city manager. So you'll see that again on the next slide from a different angle. We did create the legislative agenda framework, and I thought that worked well. And we did get the statements out, which we were very happy with, that we were able to make our statements. We also did our press statement at the end about Blake, that we were able to get out so the public knew that we were monitoring that, and so that they weren't concerned. And we have council reporting on here, but I'm not sure that worked. So, and then we also connected with committee members, with the subject matter experts. So those were things that we all thought worked well. And can I see? Yeah, go for it.
The 1.5 million.
That was on our successes. So yes, it worked well and it was a success. That was what I just brought up on the success slide. It was the first slide. Okay, so then what we don't think worked well should be the next slide. Oh, yeah, I can do it that way. What did you, because we want to ask, what do you all think worked well this year with the legislative committee from your perspective?
You secured 1.5 million funding. That's a big win for something that we really desperately needed. That was excellent. That was a big win.
Are you saying what worked really well with the committee?
Yeah, for you, for the council.
So at a moment's notice, you guys, you mustered up and got together and created all this. So I it's kudos to your character and your ambition and your hard work and all that stuff. I think the fact that in a very short amount of time, you turned out a large body of work in the very beginning. So I think that worked, your collaboration as well, if I have to give it a word. Thanks.
Not on this.
I did. It was to clarify that we're looking for feedback on our process or like, not our process, on how we worked. How did you view it as fellow council members, if you felt included or what worked in that way? So, because the other funding that way, I wanted to, what Councilmember Cavallari said about that language there. For me, what was really important, and that's what I think what worked well, is we were looking for other ways to be transparent about the work that we do and how we communicate. So that's why I felt the statements were really important, because we can talk about it in these meetings, but not everyone's watching these meetings, or there's not, not everyone's reading the minutes. So by able to have, something concrete on the front page of the website or on social media, it shares, that we are discussing these things. And so it's just trying to figure out what are all the different ways that we can communicate with our residents about how we're addressing this. And I think another example, not specific legislative committee, but I think of the city chat as also an opportunity where there can be these conversations. And I think the city chat where the city manager and where the deputy city manager were for the MCCA, there was a lot of conversation about bills. And so because we had our legislative agenda and we, had meetings about this and we discussed it, it was nice and tight to be able to talk about, well, these are our priorities, and, we could get that feedback. So I think what worked well is trying to figure out how do we disseminate this information and get that feedback loop together.
You met with your legislators, you created a legislative agenda. When you met with the legislators, what exactly did you present to them? What was presented to the legislators?
We presented to the legislators what the agenda was, that we had set for our priorities. As a council, that when we discussed and we approved what the legislative agenda was going to be, that's what we presented to them. And then also just had a very casual, frank conversation about things that are going on in the city and what we're working on as a city overall as a whole, so that they knew where we were. And that's what we presented to them.
Was there a specific ask of the legislators of what we wanted from them?
When it comes to the grant funding.
The grants?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Yes.
So, yes. So there was these two grants were asked for specifically,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Anything else that was asked for of them? I don't know if it was grants or anything else. I'm just curious what was asked of them, because I heard what Representative Donaghy said, and I've heard Senator Lubbock say that to me as well. Come ask me what you want. Tell me specifically. I was curious what we asked of them.
Well, we can only ask what you guys authorized, and what you authorized, what was on the legislative agenda and our ask for the capital funding.
Okay. I don't know what was on the legislative agenda. Okay. I was just asking. Thanks.
Councilmember Paddock?
Yeah, I just echo what Councilmember Degginger said. I felt like what worked was you guys were consistent, you were clear, comprehensive in what we all agreed to, in how you communicated that to our representatives and senator. What you heard back and where it was going basically week by week, or almost week by week, as it was going through the session. I think that was really great. I would say for myself, that was terrific. I think for this body, it was terrific. And I think for the 3 or 4 citizens that listen into this, I think it was actually really useful and helpful to know that as well. And I will say, I think that's the type of thing that helps this city punch above its weight when it comes to grants and impact and whatnot from the state, is because of that level of coordination. And for my first go around, I thought it was really impressive.
Thank you. Next up, we'll move on to our longer list of things that we felt, or staff as well, because this is not just our list, that we felt didn't work or that we want to improve on, just so you know. So, and one of them was, we would like to have increased communication to the public. This is something we did a great start. We were off to a great start. But we think it's very important that we start to have more communication with them of what the legislative agenda is, more so they know what we're doing, and more continual communication. So that was something that we think we need to work on. Leadership or follow-up, expectations and responsibilities. I don't know what that one means for sure.
That That was a Councilmember Duque one.
Okay, so that's why she can speak to it. Awesome.
It's just making sure what didn't work. It's making sure we understand what our expectations were of the committee members and staff that were in attendance. Yeah, then it dinged. Yeah, it's just making sure we and I want to assure our fellow council members. So we do have a meeting tomorrow for the legislative committee, and we're going through a process. I know it's in the packet for tonight, but I think we weren't meeting tomorrow. Oh, no, is it the 9th? Sorry, maybe it's next. Anyways,
We'll figure that out.
we have, oh yeah, maybe it's the following week. I can't remember. We have another legislative meeting to talk about our process. And that's where we'll be going through those kind of things. But that's what I think there are areas to improve on for that one.
Awesome. And yes, that is a good point, because I'd put down on one of mine, so it must be yes, it's a comment that we need to make sure that we have clear agenda set of what we want to accomplish at each meeting, because since it was new, sometimes that was a little not clear for us. So we need to do better on that. Also, finalizing the legislative agenda earlier. So now that we've got this started, it's really important that we get the legislative agenda finished earlier in the year. And this had affects a couple different things. One, so we know what we're working on way in advance so that we can give our representatives insight into what we are looking for before the session starts, which also would lend itself for what I thought was really important, and something that Councilmember Allison mentioned too, that we can bring our representatives and state senator back in, tell them as a whole entire council what our legislative agenda is. That's the way I envision that should work, so that all of you can tell them what is important to you, what we're doing from your words. They know from every council member what's important to you and what you'd like to see. And it's not just the mayor and I relaying the information. So, because everyone may have something else that's important, that's important to you, that wasn't actually on the agenda, so that you can talk to them. So I think that's extremely important. Somebody put shorten it to 1 to 2 pages. That was not mine. So some other things that we thought we needed to work on. Let's see. I'm looking to see just which ones we need to. We need to work on the mayor council approval of priorities and our communication, because we need to have it clear what the committee is available or able to go advocate for, what we can write letters for, what we can have Brian write letters for, because, or whoever is the mayor in the future, because it is hard. Sometimes things happen and they happen fast. And if we have to come back to council to get permission to do that letter, sometimes it's too late. The committee hearings already happened. So we need to have some clear priorities from the council as a whole on when we can actually do communication and what those parameters are. So something really important that we need to do. And also, I was concerned that we reported too much. You all may feel differently. So I would really like some input on that. That we may need to work on how that's going to look, and collaborate on communication with neighboring cities, and improve the bill tracker, which you all didn't really see. That was something that we utilized. So I think those were the things that really felt like would need improvement. So from your perspective as council members out here, was what we went through, what this process felt like for you. We would like some input on what you think might need to be improved, because we're going to go back and city manager's already put together standard operating procedure draft, and we're going to work on implementing what you think needs to change, what we think needs to change, and come up with some new procedures to bring back to council on the 23rd. Brian has his hand raised.
As successful as our first foray was into the legislature, looking back, I'm concerned that we took up way too much staff time.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
particularly looking at Mike, because I know how much time he spent trying to keep track of some of these housing bills and the various iterations and amendments, and maybe it was an unusual year because of all the bills that were related to his department. But I would urge the committee to talk to other jurisdictions about how they utilize a lobbyist in Olympia to be the eyes and ears on the ground and hopefully minimize the amount of time that we have to take staff away from their day-to-day responsibilities. In terms of a bill tracker, I would really argue that we not waste our time with it. Go to Washington, the legislature's website. If we just have a document that has a hot link to the bills we're following, you can click on that link and that's as good a bill tracker as any staff is going to put together. It's a pain in the, you know what, to track all those bills, and it takes up an inordinate amount of staff time that I don't think provides us any benefit when it takes 30 seconds to pull up the website, push in 4 numbers and the bill pops up, tells you where the committee hearing is, shows you the amendments, shows you the status. So I would, if we have a bill tracker, it needs to be nothing more than the bills we're following and a hot link to the state's website. And then, as Mayor Pro Tem said, I think we really need to get to a point with an agenda, legislative agenda, where the mayor pro tem, city manager and deputy city manager have some direction and some autonomy to take what you guys have given as the direction and run with it. We can't come back with every letter and wordsmith every word that we say. Seeing if all 7 of us agree to the language, there's got to be some clear enough direction that we know what the will of the council is, that we can go and represent that without having to come back to say, was this okay? Was that okay? But I think those looking back are the constructive criticisms I would have. In particular, I think the sooner we can get a handle on how we could utilize a lobbyist and learn how other jurisdictions do it, then we can make a decision if that makes sense for us to, as a way to alleviate the burden on staff, because we've got a lot on their agenda for the coming year and years ahead.
Anybody else have any insight on things you'd like to see improved or changed? Oh, Laura.
I actually just wanted to know if Representative Donaghy would have input on how she sees, like if we had hired a lobbyist, if that would have been less impactful than staff and council.
Honestly, I think that's really up to you. Like, if you want to hire a lobbyist and that's who we interact with, that's totally fine. If you want to continue to use staff and that's who we interact with, that's totally fine. It's what works best for you. As long as we're getting the message and we're able to get a response back to you, that's going to be what's important.
Before you sit down, a question, do you see the hybrid model? I mean, because part of that answer to that question with the lobbyists have always been there in the past because you had to be down there to testify. You had to travel down to Olympia to sit in the hearing room to see whether or not after 2 hours you're going to get your 3 minutes to speak. And so the virtual world has changed that with the virtual committee hearings. Do you see that continuing for the years to come, or at least in some form?
It provides enough opportunity for people who couldn't testify before to actually participate in the process. I don't see it going anywhere. What you do not get is, standing outside during session,
Right.
Sending in notes and that kind of stuff, or showing up in people's offices. So there's a balance, but I think we're going to see a continuation of both.
Good. Martin had a question or a comment.
Martin.
No, I was referring to our deputy city manager. I had a question. Thanks.
Yeah, then that's why I suggest we need to talk to other cities that are our size to see how they utilize lobbyists. I don't know if it makes sense, but we've got to find a way to not take up so much of staff time, keeping track of all these bills. Councilmember Steckler?
I agree with you on the bill tracker. I think we could reduce that down to just an update or referral to another source. I think the best thing for us, I think, would be to have a list of objectives or priorities that the team has, the legislative team has. And let's just focus on those. Let's agree on whatever those are. And that's, however many they are, let's not have too many of them because, let's just focus on what are the priorities, whatever that number is, and report on those and how our activities are coming up against those and how successful or challenged we are on those particular objectives of those priorities. And keep reporting on that. I think that would be of interest to the council. I think that'd be of interest to the staff. I don't think we need to report on the bills. yeah, that would be my input and my recommendation going forward.
Councilmember Duque.
So I'll address that really quickly. And then my other question is, we did have a legislative agenda. It's about 2-page sheet that we approved, and it's exactly what you're saying. And those were our main things. And then what we did is based off of those topics, like there were the 2 capital funding and there was one about housing and there was the public records one. From there, we split it up as a committee. And then we would track what bills were going on with those that touched on our big, I think you said like priorities, right? I think that was the actual document. So I can forward it to you, but it was approved in this council and it was shared. I think we talked about it a couple of times. So we did have that document, but I will agree and it's not a but, I will agree, that was wrong. I agree that there was an opportunity to make that general document more public in terms of talking about communication and having it, on our, it was absolutely public, but making sure that it's kind of its own landing page, what we're focusing on as a committee. Those are things that we talked about improvement. What I pinged my light on was for is I actually wanted to thank our city clerk because of his experience in another city. A lot of our conversations came about with his understanding about what other cities were doing in terms of their legislative committees. I agree with the mayor in terms of let's think through staff time, that stuff that we want to talk about, and lobbyists. That absolutely makes sense for this as we continue forward. But that was very helpful because we just did searches to see, from my perspective, I was looking to see how did other cities communicate about their legislative agenda publicly with their residents and seeing that. And so that's what we also were trying to focus on and do. So yes, we did have that. And I wanted to thank, of course, all staff, but city clerk for providing us that perspective from coming from someone who came recently from another city and what the work was done there.
Councilmember Ellison.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, that legislative agenda, it was two pages long. How that turns into 5 bills or 25 bills is completely up to what happens in Olympia, right? So at one point we were tracking a lot more number of bills than we wound up reporting on, right? They died in committee or they just didn't go anywhere. So I think it's key that we all rally around that agenda because it does take a lot of energy to track what happens once bills start rolling into their committees and out of their committees, et cetera.
Do we want to introduce the SOP really quick? Because I think we're going to have a follow-up discussion on the 23rd, aren't we, with April? So should we introduce that briefly? And
I think really staff has started putting together the SOP for moving forward. We were going to take information from tonight and maybe go through and tweak the SOP and bring back next time for a discussion. So I don't know that we need to look over the whole thing right now tonight. It's getting a little late.
it was in the packets.
Yeah, but it's in the packet. If you want to start to look at it to prepare for the 23rd. And then Rep Berg wasn't able to make it tonight. She had a prior engagement. She will be here on the 23rd to have so she can give us her insights on the legislative session as well as we go through that SOP. So I think that's it, unless you guys have any more questions.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'm not trying to extend out your workload or anything, but since there is a special session, are you going to have to, continue to, you know what I mean? It's
Yes.
going to continue on here, I
Yes.
guess. So create a formula for that as well is one thing I would add maybe to next steps or the next process, especially in this circumstance.
Well, I think one of the next steps, recall that I brought up the mayor's letter regarding the county ordinance that you referred to. And I didn't ask for you to authorize me to sign it because we hadn't had a chance to review it and had some questions. The chief, in consultation with our prosecuting attorney, has since had a chance to review it and has advised Stephanie and I that it's consistent with the approach that if we need to act, it would be what they would be bringing to us and recommending for us to move forward. Hopefully that will be unnecessary. Hopefully the legislature, and I think they will act, but that was, the only thing is 1628 is the county's response to it is generally consistent with what we're going to be advised if we need to do something is what we should do. Is that accurate summary, Chief?
Yes, Mayor. Well, there's a few amendments that we would like to discuss to our current ordinance. But yes, very consistent with what the county's brought forward.
Yeah, generally the structure of the ordinance, I think we have some differences on like the definition of public space and technical details like that, but the general concept for the classification of the crime and the treatment provisions and that sort of thing are consistent with what we would be asked to move forward. Councilmember Duque.
Mine was not about that, so I just wanted to make sure you had your
Any
answer.
other questions, comments on that? Do we, I mean, I know we're getting some pressure to take a position on the county's ordinance, which we haven't read it in detail. I mean, our staff has and advisors, it's consistent with what they'll be recommending. I don't know that we need to take a position on something, and especially not knowing that the legislature is going to act next week, which I suspect they will. So maybe we take this back up on the 23rd if we need to. Regarding the. Yeah. Well, if the legislature doesn't act during the special session, we'll be moving something fairly quickly so that we're ready to go and have something in place by July 1st. So. Councilmember Duque, on a different topic.
Yes, I also just wanted to share that as part of our legislative committee meeting, we're also talking about how we can have this open communication with our county council representatives. I don't think that was highlighted here, but that's something we've all talked about. And also, you know, what does it look like for our other representatives, and how do we have this conversation in the scope SOP that we still as a legislative committee still need to review. So I agree that this should be put on hold until we've reviewed it as a committee, but there is language in there about how we work with neighboring cities, which is good. So I want to make sure that you guys know that that's what we're thinking through, not just it's not just only this from just Olympia. We're trying to think of all aspects. So thank you.
Any final comments? Thank you again, Representative Donaghy, for coming down tonight. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's go back to old business and talk about shopping carts. Chief and city attorney, city manager, I'm not sure who's going to kick us off.
Okay. Martin, did you have any comments ahead of jumping in?
I don't, Grant. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good evening, council. We're back following up from our previous study session in March regarding an issue that had come up with respect to the proliferation of abandoned shopping carts in the city. Could we advance the slide? And just by way of to refresh our recollections, during our study session, Chief White reported that in recent months before the study session, that at least 50 shopping carts had been found off premises of retailers. Obviously, having that volume of shopping carts off the properties in right-of-ways at bus stops is not only visually polluting, but creates dangerous conditions and also assists in property theft. So the question then is, what should be done about it? We went through and discussed, we've moved to the next slide, that there had been a number of issues a number of cities that have addressed this issue and have looked at ordinances. There were about 6 or 7 cities in the state, and we just discussed where they were and some of the key features of those ordinances. Following the presentation, council, you gave some direction to staff, and your direction was to pursue essentially a multiple track approach to this problem. One, to go out and speak to the retailers regarding the recent proliferation in abandoned shopping carts and discuss with them if there were ways to discourage the removal from their properties. Also, there was a suggestion to reach out to some of the multifamily property managers that where sometimes these shopping carts are left. And then finally, you instructed us to prepare an ordinance to address abandoned shopping carts. So we're here tonight to report on what we found in our outreach, but also to walk through a proposed ordinance that we have prepared. Go to the next slide. Chief White is with us tonight and was going to, can we go back one slide? I apologize. To the one that's titled Results of the Outreach or Takeaways from the Outreach. Chief White is with us tonight and was going to walk through his contacts with the retailers and others in the community.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Council. With some help from our volunteer staff here, we were able to find contact information for many of the large retailers, grocery stores in the community. We did reach out to all of those, especially the major retailers and grocery stores. All of them were made aware that we were going to have discussions regarding ordinances and the issues that we've been seeing in the community. All provided some minor interest in what we were planning, but very little discussion. They had very little to report on shrinkage. Some of them did not have noticeable loss of shopping carts that they saw. And when we offered to have them come talk to the council meeting, we haven't had anybody reach out back out to us. So we've had very little interaction with them. Like I said, none of them have asked for any additional contact. And in regards to the multifamily residential areas, we did reach out to a couple of them. Some of them actually have addressed the problems themselves because these carts are being left on their own property. To be specific, one of our complexes has made it a point to purchase a vehicle so that they can gather carts left on their property and actually take them back to the owners. So they're very cooperative and very interested in solving this problem.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chief, did anyone express consternation over the prospect of having an ordinance regulating this?
None, Mayor.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief White? That
No,
will
go ahead.
move. Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I want to move on to the next slide and start talking about some of the key provisions of the ordinance that we put together. Some of the key provisions of the ordinance are that it declares that abandoned shopping carts are a nuisance. It intends to regulate retail establishments with 10 or more carts. The idea there is to exempt some of the smaller retailers who have a very small and finite number of carts and who likely can police their carts a little easier than the large number of carts that are available at some of the larger grocery stores and other large retail chains. The ordinance requires the retailers to be proactive, to contain their carts on their premises and to promptly return the carts or retrieve their carts that are taken. In other words, they have an affirmative duty here. Next, each cart has to have a sign identifying the owner and the contact information for reaching that owner so that the cart can be picked up. Now, this is required under state law, and I believe during our March 14th study session, Chief White showed several pictures of carts that have these signs in them. If a retailer fails to pick up the cart within 24 hours of receiving notice, and this would be notice from the city, or a vendor that the city might choose to hire to provide this service, then the cart can be picked up and the retailer will be charged either the city's staff time at their regular rates, or if a vendor is used, the cost of the vendor plus a 10% administrative fee that would go to the city. Could I have the next slide? Okay, thank you. We do provide a little bit of grace as we begin to implement this by having a provision that says that no fees will be charged for the first 3 returns. And however, we sort of have a little bit of a hammer that comes afterwards. In other words, if there's a frequent violator, one who has more than 5 abandoned carts in a period of 3 months, then we have we move to a more proactive phase of regulating that retailer. And it requires the retailer to prepare a shopping cart retrieval plan for review and approval by the city. Could I have the next slide? There's a couple of elements to the retrieval plan. The first part would be that the plan needs to discuss on-site containment ways that the retailer will try to maintain the carts on site through either employee education, through signage, through bollards or chains, or some other ways that are available for the retailer to discourage removal of the carts from the premises. The second part of a plan requires offsite measures. In other words, a plan whereby the retailer will either dedicate staff or hire a vendor to go pick up their carts that are abandoned outside of the premises. The plan must be submitted and approved. If for any reason the retailer fails to submit a plan or fails to abide by a plan, the retailer would be subject to civil penalties of $500 per day for the violation. Finally, the ordinance also recites the existence of state law that says any person who removes a shopping cart from the premises of an owner without permission is guilty of shopping cart theft, which is a misdemeanor. So those are the main features of the ordinance. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Yeah, and let's keep this to questions and keep the discussion when we have a motion on the table to talk about the substance. So are there any questions for staff? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I hit the wrong button. Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. We're talking about charging a misdemeanor for removing shopping carts. I'm not a police officer, so I don't, what exactly does that mean? What kind of sentence or anything does that, what happens when it's a misdemeanor? I guess is my question.
It depends on the level of misdemeanor. I believe this is a misdemeanor offense. 90 days in jail possible, but that's not realistically what you're looking at with this offense. More than likely, there's going to be some alternatives to that. But yes, there's an existing RCW that defines shopping cart theft as a misdemeanor offense.
Is that a state RCW?
Correct.
And just to give some context, Mayor Pro Tem, it's be no different than having a rule that says spitting on the sidewalk is a crime punishable by up to 90 days in jail. I mean, they all fall into the same category.
Councilmember Paddock?
Do we have a vendor identified that would do the collection?
Not at this time. We're still working on identifying a vendor that would want to take that role on.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Steckler?
So I had the same question as Mayor Pro Tem. So a transient person, homeless person that's using a cart for their belongings, if it's said to be one of these particular retailers in our city, that person would be guilty of a misdemeanor and arrested.
And there's a lot of things that would have to be factored into that. We'd have to have probable cause to make the arrest, first of all.
So if they had a stolen cart, that's probable cause, right?
It's a lot more difficult than that. It's not this, it's, you know, actually having to do an investigation, contacting the retailer. The retailer would want to then make sure that that retailer wants to be a victim of theft, which is stealing the property of a shopping cart from the retailer. And then moving forward from that, along the investigation, all the way through charging to figure out what is actually going to be, if found guilty, what the imposed sentence would be.
So not just being in possession of the cart is enough to be guilty of misdemeanor. You have to, the retailer would have to would have to want to post charges, correct?
It would definitely not be, it would, a lot of things can be varied in the case. Yeah, like it's hard. It's a very difficult question to answer because
Yeah,
every case is different.
that is very difficult. Have we given any thought to, I'm going back to a question that the mayor asked you at the beginning, any of these retailers have any consternation about did we discuss with any of these retailers the possibility of implementing ordinances that could wind up costing them money for having them retrieve these lost carts?
Yeah, that was one of the things that we discussed. And, we told them that there was the possibility of some type of sanctions on the retailers if these carts were left out in the community abandoned. So those things were discussed. A lot of times we're dealing with managers of these institutions.
Big chains, yeah.
And these are big, large chains. And this is, like was mentioned earlier in these discussions, is that there is some expectation that we're going to lose some shopping carts. So I'm not sure what their motivation is. They were offered the opportunity to for further discussion, and I have yet to have any questions back.
Have we had the opportunity to research any areas where this type of law has been put into practice and to see what kind of reaction the retailers have had against the city for implementing this kind of a law? I would just be curious to see.
Well, as we discussed it in March, there are at least 6 cities that have adopted ordinances of this kind. We have not gone back to the retailers in those cities to see if how they have fared in terms of enforcement. But obviously, one of the reasons to have an ordinance of this kind is to start deterring the conduct and also encouraging the responsible management and retrieval of the carts on their own.
I was just curious if that was successful. Did it deter, and was it successful? And maybe we could look into that before we implement it, just to make sure it works.
We can certainly do some outreach to the cities that have adopted the ordinance.
I prefer that because it sounds like the people who are stealing the carts aren't the ones that are really getting the hit here. It's if they steal the carts and litter our streets with them, which is what started this whole process in the first place. It's the retailer who's paying to get them brought back.
Right now, it's the city that's taking that cost on.
Right now it is, but our new ordinance is going to be the retailer.
Correct.
Yeah, I would just like to see if this would work, and if it would, I'm 100% behind it. But I just would like to check that out. Maybe we can talk to a couple cities that have implemented this. I think it'd be a good idea before we do.
Chief and Grant, to follow up on one of the questions Councilmember Steckler asked, he prefaced it by saying retailers in the city. This would apply, wouldn't it, to a retailer out of the city whose cart ends up in the city? Like, for instance, Fred Meyer on the other side of 128th, correct?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, Mayor, and the chief and I have talked about this. We certainly could enforce the nuisance element of it and the retrieval cost portion of it. Whether we can enforce setting up a cart management plan with a retailer that is outside the city is a bit more nebulous.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Allison.
Thank you, Mayor. Ever since we saw the presentation a few weeks ago, every time I'm in a grocery store in town, I check them out. And I noticed on Sunday that the Safeway right here in downtown had RFIDs and nomenclature on them, that said if you take it off the property, it'll be disabled or something. I don't know how that really works, but it had marking on it. And another element was they have to put their ownership tag on it too, right? So that wasn't on there, but the RFID was. So, educating the businesses that have the shopping carts that keep winding up on our streets, that would be step one, right? They could avoid even being in a situation that could hold them liable. But right now they obviously don't have any way to control them because they wind up all over the place. So I guess for the Fred Meyer that's across the street, because I see those shopping carts on our side of town all the time, like every day when I'm driving to work. If there was a way to at least, get them to come and get them, if there, even if we couldn't charge them, that would solve the problem, right? It's the taking them back home that I want to see, not just see them stack up on the corners. Thank you.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thanks, Mayor. I think when I first brought this up about 6 months ago, 5 months ago, somewhere around there, I made the remark then that the goal is not to have our police officers chasing down people with carts with items in it. It's to deter the merchant from allowing these carts to leave the property. And that has to be our primary goal here. I think we've already established it's a nuisance. We're finding them in our streams, we're finding them in our trails, finding them in our ponds, and our rights of way. I've done some research. I provided it, I believe, on the first draft I gave everybody, but I also, Alameda, California was a great, really used a lot of their language, because they had one of the biggest problems is they were seeing their staff they had a full-time 1.5 staff members doing this all day long, picking up carts and having to drop them off. And so we know that the city is absorbing the cost of this. And for the most part, the chief has had his police cadets who are waiting to go to the academy having to pick these up. So it's not going away. The law or the ordinance is not, it's not draconian. There's nothing. The reason there's no consternation from the merchants is because they know it's coming. They know it exists pretty much all around them. But if you don't have this, see, they have already baked the costs of the carts into the cost of doing business. So if you don't have some sort of hammer, to use the city attorney's words, then everything is pointless. It's just going to exist and continue to, manifest in the city. So the reason you don't have consternation is because like I just talked to the manager at Albertsons. They order almost 25 a month is that they go through. They got 50 for the quarter. She said they lose them at least 2-3 a week. So
Vince, we're in questions.
Yeah, I was answering a question.
No, we asked the
All right.
questions at this point.
I know.
You can speak to the motion when we get a motion on the floor. Question, Sean? We'll keep the statements for when there's a motion, we get an ordinance on the floor. Question, Councilmember Duque.
For the motion and for the approval of this, if there's typos or if there's any like language or edits or that way, can it be changed after a motion?
Yeah, there's a provision at the end of the ordinance that allows us to clean up any clerical or typographical.
That's what I want. So so we can clean up clerical without like pointing them out tonight.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Other questions before we entertain a motion? Director Todd, did you have a question?
Mr. Mayor, with your permission, so I'm looking at 8.06.090 fees, and it talks about a minimum of 1 hour for staff time. I'll say we don't have a good way to track that, but the fact that minimum 1 hour may work. But there's staff time both in terms of receiving the first phone call, retrieving the cart, figuring out where it goes. There's a bad cart here. We go get the cart. We look to see what it is. A phone call or an email goes out to somebody to say, come get your cart. We wait for 24 hours. Then we get it back to them in some fashion. And then we have the process of invoicing those folks for when they don't pay that money. We deliver the cart back to them, et cetera. My question is this: does this include staff time or the accounting part of this? Because there's several different aspects of this that I think are going to actually add up to more than an hour per cart. So we're talking 50, 60, 70 bucks probably with a loaded thing. This is
1 hour is a minimum charge. It's not a maximum. So we are entitled to pick up all of our staff time.
Yeah, so we do it. So for each cart, do we monitor who took the first phone call, who went and got the cart, who did this, who did that? Or do we, each instance, is it an hour minimum for accounting to issue an invoice and receive that money? Is an hour minimum for Public Works to pick it up, return it? This is a very complicated process. So I apologize. It sounds simple, but this is complicated. We're talking a lot of staff time that we don't have. Would you rather us trim trees or pick up shopping carts. They're both a nuisance, but this is a complicated process. I guess that's a statement. Apologize.
I've lost my connection, so I can't pull it up. Whoever has control of the screen, could you pull up that section of the ordinance that Director Todd was asking the question about? Is anybody?
While it's doing that. just if I
Page
could ask a question.
27 of the packet, page 6 of the ordinance, I believe. Yes.
Is Adrian pulling it up on the screen? Or is Joe out? Joe must be coming in. Did you have a question, Sean?
Yeah, would it be possible to maybe after a few months, just understand what's the minimum amount of time per in total for these, and then we raise the minimum fee?
Yeah.
And then minimum number of hours or minutes or whatever.
So let's look at we actually have I want to see the actual ordinance, not the summary. In the packet was the ordinance.
Is it in the slide? It's not in the slide deck. You're gonna have to call it the packet.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, but I want everyone to see it.
There's somebody on it.
Adrian is.
Okay, you'll have to tell me what page.
What section is it, Director Todd? What
It's
section?
090.
6.090, page 6, fees.
Can you blow
Right
that
there,
up a little
first
bit so
paragraph.
we can read it? A little more, there we go.
There's a typo that shouldn't be 830080 in the second line. It's probably 806080.
So I guess the question that comes out of this, Director Todd, is how much time are we spending now before we implement this ordinance? Are we spending on retrieving carts and returning them? Do we have any
You guys
estimation?
have done a couple of
Yeah,
sweeps. That's all we've ever done.
What we've done currently, Mayor, is we've sent out police cadets, and those individuals are spending maybe an hour to 2 hours out in the city with a public works truck picking up shopping carts. We don't have an estimated time figure for the pickup of a single cart. We haven't reduced it to that time frame.
But it's something that staff is currently, or police department is primarily handling that now.
Correct, because we do not have the ordinance. We have no, we're just doing it right now as a courtesy to address the nuisance.
And so if we adopted this ordinance, that would shift over to Public Works. Am I correct, Mike?
That's the way I read this, because the director is the director of public works. It's referenced in here. So the director is going to have people going to develop plans with each of these merchants and monitor those plans, I presume, and then is going to have this return process. Somebody is going to receive a phone call, says, here's a cart. Somebody's going to go find that cart. Somebody's going to read whose cart it is. That information is going to be what we're going to use to go tell that whoever's cart it was an Albertson's cart, and it was this Albertson's cart, not the other Albertson's cart. There's a lot of different people, just a little bit of time, but it is something that's going to happen with an expectation appropriately by the city. This is going to happen fairly quickly. So is this higher priority than other things? I'm just concerned about the logistics of this. I'm a logistics and operations kind of guy, and this is difficult.
It's a good question.
So
Councilman-
is that happening now?
Hold on
So-
one second.
Okay, so why would that happen
Grant.
if there's an ordinance?
I'm presuming by reading this that it says that someone will report there's a cart somewhere, or we might go find that cart. But then there's also an invoicing process, a notification and invoicing process that probably isn't happening with what the cadets did. I think they went and collected what they could one morning and put all the Fred Meyer carts together, and when I guess dropped them off the back of the truck at Fred Meyer, as opposed to contacting Fred Meyer and saying you got 24 hours to pick it up, or else we will start charging you money and delivering your cart.
So right now we're doing random sweeps. This ordinance would set up a procedure if we adopted it where people could call up the city, report that the carts are missing, and then the Public Works Department has to take the time to go out and collect them, and then they invoice, return them, and then they invoice
Does the ordinance say we're going to set up a system?
that's what
No, that's.
what that fee
Does it say,
section says.
it says there's a fee structure, but does it say that we're going to set up a system? And why would we set up a system?
Well, there's no teeth in the fees if they're not a system to collect.
That's not true.
And we can
If,
track
hold on, let me
this.
just finish. If what we're doing now, and I'm not suggesting we can continue to do cadets, but if certain, every month or every other month or something like that, there's a number that we go out and look for, which sounds like what's happening today, then we get economies of scale and going out and doing that work and not doing this onesie twosie that costs us. I think this is to Director Todd's point, this is an operations issue. Let's optimize the operation and not just guess that it's going to be a onesie twosie.
Yeah, and I think he's cautioning us to be careful that we're gonna have a staff issue where we're taking staff away from doing other things we want them to do to enforce the shopping cart ordinance and bill the property owners. So I think he's cautioning us to be cognizant of that when we come to budget time, that we may need to consider some more staff funding for some more staffing so that we can get that done. Deputy City Manager.
So we are looking into potentially getting a vendor for this,
Okay.
but until that happens, on the backside, we can have this laid out. Hey, here's a phone call. This person handled it. People can just track their time we're gonna have. We can throw it into a spreadsheet. And then once we have the template in place, it's gonna be update numbers, no problem. But the goal is to eventually have some kind of a vendor handle this so
Okay.
that this isn't on staff.
And I think we can always, if we take action to adopt this private direction, that would like staff to try to track this so that in 6 months, we can have a sense of what the staff time is that it's taking up, so we can figure out what a solution might be. City Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it might help for the chief to weigh in on, to give us an idea of how many carts he picked up and over what time frame to give you a sense of kind of what we're dealing with. And it was 50 carts that we picked up over I think the lifetime of this program. But I think a lot of those carts were probably left for, we don't know how long. I do notice that some of those were rusted, some of those were been there for probably, we don't know how long. So we just don't have enough data on it at this point, but 50 over how long, Chief?
Over a couple month period. And I would say that without an ordinance, where do we start from? I feel that if we don't have some mechanism to address this issue and have some responsible parties in that collaboration, every person in this has some ownerships. So the owner of the cart, the people that are taking the carts away from the premises, and the city does to help, address the issue. So I think that without an ordinance, we're just going to be continuing to have a police cadet, which we're going to run out of shortly because he starts the academy May 24th, thank goodness. So, but without that, what are we going to do? So that's just the question. And we're going to continue to get these calls of complaints of shopping carts abandoned on properties or on the corner in our right of way. And then we're not going to have any mechanism to hold the owners of these abandoned carts responsible for the issue of the nuisance. And I agree with Director Todd. There is a lot of logistics that need to be worked out, and that is a definite concern. But without a starting place, where will we be?
Councilmember Steckler.
Two things. I do like the idea of going away from immediately going out and picking up the carts, but collect the information and do a sweep, maybe on a monthly basis, something like that. That's smart. The other one that came up to me was, somebody brought this up indirectly. The Safeway store that we have, the big Safeway, as you know, about half of those carts are Albertsons carts. So as those are discovered as Albertsons carts, they need to go back to a Safeway store. But when we find them, they say Albertsons. So we do have an Albertsons over in 132nd, 35th. So we probably should think, you have a solution for that, Chief?
Well, no, just a comment. And the issue is that the Safeway here in Mill Creek is actually the distributor of carts for the Albertsons Safeway chains in the Seattle area. So he has an overabundance of carts that he stores. And so he probably has Safeway and Albertsons carts on his lot. And so that's one of the things is that, how do we definitely identify those? If they're marked Albertsons, we have one Albertsons location within the city. And if they're marked Safeway, we have one Albertsons or one Safeway location now in the city. It's not, we don't have two Albertsons anymore. So I think we can maybe address that, but I would defer to the city attorney to speak further to that.
I think that's something we're gonna have to follow up with Albertson. So I wanted to go back to the question of what are the options here? You know, we have what we included in terms of the fee structure was the most aggressive approach that we'd seen a city take, which is, you know, keep track of the time and bill for the time that was spent. If there's a way to do that efficiently, that's great. Obviously, the other way to do it is to contract with a company to do the work and then add an administrative charge. The last one is also, you know, some cities do set a flat fee and then you can set it and then change it from periodically to keep up with either costs or inflation. So those are the options that are available to council for addressing the cost elements. Administratively, obviously, there'll be a need to develop an internal process. It does not specifically require the Public Works Department to be picking it up, but you know, it's going to be one of two. But that responsibility will be in one of two places, either the Public Works Department or in the police department. So the idea is over time to make it work efficiently and make it work in the least costly manner for the city.
Councilmember Steckler, question?
Wouldn't it make more sense to get the vendor signed up first, and why bring this on to us as an administrative duty when we have a staff issue, a load, all these? Just let's go out and get the vendor, get that signed up, and then move ahead with this.
So we've had a lot of trouble identifying a vendor that will just do this shopping cart hauling. There's a lot of vendors that do hauling of debris and things of that nature. But finding one that's specific to shopping cart hauling for this, that will sign an agreement with City of Mill Creek. I've had a little bit of difficulty finding that vendor.
That's all the bigger concern for me. We might wind up owning this forever if we start it.
And not only that, where do we store shopping carts if we're now trying to store them and things of that nature? That's why I think that just having the ability to return those carts and invoice them is a great opportunity.
Other questions? Any motions?
Sure, I'll make a motion. Motion to approve an ordinance amending the Mill Creek Municipal Code by adding a new chapter 8.06, establishing shopping cart regulations and setting an effective date.
Second.
Discussion? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I find myself kind of conflicted here because on the one hand, we do have a concern with the shopping carts. They can't just sit out here. They're popping up all over the place. But I feel like I have a lot of concerns that I don't know we've fully addressed yet. One, I'm uncomfortable with there being a misdemeanor of people taking the shopping carts. I feel like I understand why, and that there's an RCW. I feel like I see lots of people, including businessmen, walking across the street with the shopping carts. And I feel like go to the bus stop. And I think they would be shocked to know that it was a misdemeanor that they were taking the shopping cart. And we would really need to be doing some serious marketing and messaging so that people in the city know that if they take the shopping cart off the property, that it's a misdemeanor. I'm concerned. I hear Director Todd discussing the staffing. And I want them out there cleaning my streets and which would include taking off the shopping carts. I agree. And working on the parks. And I'm also concerned how we be invoicing them. We have to have a system. Who's going to be taking care of that? Where's that staffing going to come from? And so I have a lot of concerns on how this is actually going to play out. Yet we need to do something. So, but I'm not comfortable voting for this as it is tonight and moving forward in this form. And I know I'd like to see us looking into some different things. I think it was the sheriff's department that I saw posted this week. They had a volunteer group that they put together that was out picking up shopping carts. I'd have to confirm if that was the sheriff's post, but it was on Facebook. And they put together a committee of volunteers that they've tasked to start going out and picking up the shopping carts and returning them. And I don't know if that's something we'd be interested in, but it would definitely take care of the shopping carts. And I also still go back to that I'm not comfortable charging business owners because someone took their stuff off. Because how did the business owner, like, we want our businesses to thrive. I don't want to be charging them because somebody else took the carts away. So I think I have more questions than answers right now. So I'm not comfortable with voting for this in its present form. So that's where I stand.
Councilmember Paddock.
Excuse me, didn't realize I was next. The reason I support this is twofold. One, originally, is the thing that I like about this is it follows basic laws of economics. You put the cost on the cost causer, and the action is going to stop, or it's going to stop slowly. What we're allowing our very, very large businesses to do is let us be their service to go get their carts. And this is a part of their cost of business. They bake it in. They're losing carts. It's not a big deal to them, but it's a scar I feel on our city. And I do think, and I think I'm hearing this from the staff, and if I'm not, I really hope they raise a hand and correct me. It feels like there's an operational process that needs to be developed, and there's an opportunity to do that before we create any sort of significant scale and going out and executing the collection of these carts. But I would be happy to be corrected if that's not true. So for those two reasons, I'm supporting it.
I'm not going to make any motions, but I have two things I'd like to throw out for discussion to consider. One is technical and one is substantive. In 090 subsection 3, I hate this phrase, something rubs me the wrong way, but it says the city's shopping cart pickup and return services. This isn't a surface. I would like to see that revised. So maybe it says something like, in the event that this city picking up carts is not intended to supplant an owner's obligation. I just don't like the reference to the word services. But the other issue I have is the exemption for businesses that have 10 carts or less. I mean, we've declared a cart as a public, if we adopt this, we're declaring a cart that's lost, stolen, or been as a public nuisance. It's a public nuisance if it's a cart, not where it comes from. I mean, to me, the example I thought of is if someone drives a Ferrari 65 down 35th, we're going to pull him over for speeding because he's a public safety danger. Are we saying that if someone drives 65 in a Yugo down 35th, we're not going to arrest them because they can't afford the Ferrari? I mean, to me, if the cart's a nuisance, it's a nuisance. And I don't think we should be sending an arbitrary limit of 10 carts is where you're okay, but above that, you're not. So I would suggest we consider, or I'd be interested if others have the same concern as I do with that. Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thank you, Mayor. If I might be able to answer your question, I'm not sure. I think the whole 10 cart idea, in my opinion, I know when I was talking about it, was just to create a nuanced effect to some that might have had consternation that we're trying to beat up the little guy. I don't even think that exists. I don't even think there's a merchant in town that has 10 carts or less. So I hope that wouldn't be the decision maker, whether you'd support it or not. But I would support your removal of that. That was just, again, kind of like a placeholder. Just like the chief said a moment ago, you have to have a starting point. The burden, like it or not, has been shifted to us, right? And we're going to keep on eating it. It's going to happen more and more. And inaction tonight is going to show that, hey, they're not worried about it. So it'll stay status quo. Now, there's going to be some growing pains. I get it, but I'll wage bottom dollar 6 months to a year. We're not having this conversation, and we're not having the degree of carts in our rights of way in our riparian areas. So I'm hoping that you'll support this bill. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it addresses a need that's becoming more and more prevalent. Thanks.
Other discussion? There's no further someone's starting to say something, I'm sorry. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? The ordinance passes 6-1-0. I don't think we're gonna need this amount of time, but can we have a motion to extend the regular meeting till 9:30?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Meeting is so extended.
Mayor, can I add?
Concerns, Director Todd. So we go into this with our eyes wide open. So thank you for bringing up your comments on the bill. So we go into this with our eyes wide open, so.
Mayor, can I add for the city attorney to clarify if we need a motion on that amendment to take out the word services?
There was no amendment. I didn't make a motion and no one made a motion. So there was, the ordinance was passed as it was presented. Okay, Director Dodd, are you taking this one?
Thank you. Joe told me how to do this. We're still shared. Is that true?
Are we not doing the boards and commissions first?
I'm not taking this one.
Oh, come on, Mike.
You tricked me. Somebody else is. You saw that way. Come on. Let's not.
All right. Let's see, we need to get the, up unless you want me to share my screen, Adrian.
Maybe Grant's sharing his screen, so we just said it.
It looks like Joe's gonna pull it up for you.
Which?
I have it up on mine if you want to. Let me.
Is this it?
Yep, there we go. Okay.
Who's going to?
Can somebody advance the slides? Okay, just to jump into this, we had a study session in late March discussing some proposed changes in governance of the boards and commissions. We brought back an ordinance last week for your review, and during the course of your deliberations, you provided some instructions to come back with some additional changes. And specifically, they were in the general provisions, which are found in chapter 4.02, to add language that members of the boards and commissions will vote to excuse a member's absence if there's an authorized basis for the absences in it. If you recall, we expanded the bases under which boards and commissioners could be absent, could be subject to an excused absence. So then that change was made. We also added a provision in all of the board for each of the boards and commissions to utilize the public comment and public hearing rules that govern your city council meetings. You adopted that at the time you adopted the amendments to your governance manual under resolution 2021-604. So we've included that. And then also there was some language in the under the design commission in chapter 4.18060 that was, I will say generously, it was confusing, and it related to their public comment process, and we got rid of that and cleaned up the language. Then finally, I think the last item that was the one that you wanted to look at some alternatives for the question of residency, for a residency requirement for planning commissioners. Currently, you don't have a residency requirement. And there was a discussion about how that might be addressed. And we were asked to develop some alternatives. And if we go to the next slide, I think we can lay out what the alternatives are. Can we advance the slide? There we go. Oops, we faded to black. in item, yeah, slide 3, if we could go to slide 3. Perfect, thank you. So 3 alternatives have been developed for you to consider and hopefully select one tonight. Alternative 1 would require that at least 5 of the members of the Planning Commission reside within the city limits of Mill Creek. No more than 2 may reside outside the city. However, the 2 must reside within the city's municipal urban growth area. Alternative 2 would require all 7 members to be residents. However, any current member or members, and I believe there may be 2 that fit that category, who do not reside in Mill Creek, would be permitted to complete their current terms and to seek reappointment. But upon their decision to complete their service, either by resignation or otherwise, the positions would be filled in the future with Mill Creek residents. Then finally, there's a third alternative, which requires all 7 members of the commission to be members that reside within Mill Creek or within the Mill Creek municipal urban growth area. So those are the 3 alternatives staff came up with. At this point, we can just move to the 4th slide, which simply says we're looking for some direction from you on which alternative you want to select. And if these, and with these changes, are you ready to adopt the ordinance?
Grant, under any of these alternatives, what do we do if we don't get a resident of Mill Creek who applies for a vacancy?
Under any of them?
Yeah, I mean, under any of these scenarios, how do we fill the position if we say they have to be residents, or if we say that there has to be 5 that are residents and 2 that are non-residents, and we only get, we only have 4 that are residents?
Well, at that, I think that you'd have to continue the recruitment process and see if you can fill it with that requirement.
No, it's not what we do right now.
That is not what you do, but it's
Not
what
with
you
the
could
planning
do.
commission. This is specific to the planning commission.
And it's, as I said, remember that there are only 2 commissions right now. Planning Commission doesn't have a residency requirement, neither does the Design Review Board. The other, the A&B Board and the Parks Board both have residency requirements.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thank you, Mayor. Just out of curiosity, before I ask my next question, what is the residential makeup of the board now?
2 members are non-residents.
I believe that's correct. Yeah, there's 2 members who are non-residents.
And one,
Let me back up. It's 4-2 because we currently have 1 vacancy. Was that your only question?
yeah, after that answer, yeah.
Councilmember, or Mayor Pro Tem Duque.
Oh, you said Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I prefer alternative 2. Am I allowed to say that in this section, or are we just asking questions?
That's fine.
In the reason why is because I feel that it needs to be all Mill Creek residents. Because they're making decisions about what the city looks like. But I acknowledge that we have somebody, at least 1 person on there right now that is not. And I think it would be really, I'm thinking a word I shouldn't say. It would very much be not nice of us to kick them off when they're already on there. So I would go with alternative 2 because I think it's the most fair of grandfathering them in, but moving towards having all Mill Creek residents.
Councilmember Paddock.
I question is, was there a reason there isn't the kind of alternative 2 that would also allow the other 5 or whatever it is, or 7 after the 2 are have left the Planning Commission to reside within the urban growth area?
Sorry, say that again.
So
Yeah.
That's alternative 1.
That sounds a lot like alternative 3.
well, what I'm seeing is alternative 2 says the 2 folks that are currently outside of the city and the urban growth area, from what I understand, those two are allowed to stay on until basically their term plus one expires.
Right. No, as long as they want to seek reappointment,
Oh, continue. Okay, they
Yes.
continue on after. Okay, great.
no term.
Or not great or not, but. Right, so those, but it doesn't allow for those five for us to seek people that are outside, but within the urban sub area. I'm saying that wrong, I'm sure. Urban growth area, those other five can't be. And if we lose one of those two, then we've lost the ability to have somebody else outside the city limits.
That's correct.
Okay, which I guess I'll just throw a statement in there. I do think there is some quality ability. There's some help that people that live outside the city limits but are within our urban area they have a vested interest in what the city looks like as well. And would think that there would be an opportunity to recruit from those areas for the positions.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. And so maybe I missed it in the beginning. Why aren't we including the design review board in this process to have a kind of blanket extension? Here's why. I'm not sure why we're having this conversation. I almost feel like I'm maybe targeting. Maybe that's a strong word. I don't know, or just trying to gerrymander a panel at this point.
No, the discussion we had was the code right now. The design review has specific requirements of the different qualifications that need to be on the board. That's why we don't limit it to the city, to make sure we can get the appropriate people with the qualifications. The planning commission is a little different. We don't have, and the design review board doesn't have a residency requirement either, correct? So that's why we were looking at this. Is there was some discussion last week with this planning commission making recommendations to the council on important growth issues. Should we limit it to residents or not? So that's why we asked staff to come up with some ideas of how we might be able to address that for us to discuss this week.
I mean, I think the brass tacks of it, the mayor pro tems and Councilmember Paddock's comments of someone making decisions on behalf of the citizens of Mill Creek should have a vested interest. I mean, it made sense. I didn't know that you could not be a resident until just a little bit ago. So, so I would support her and his how they see it.
Yeah, because I struggle with this because I think I would prefer alternative 3. If I went with 2, I'd want 2A. So it would be all 7 members should be residents of Mill Creek. Current members can serve. And then when there's openings, if there's not a Mill Creek resident who applies, the council has the ability to appoint a non-resident, but that gets overly complicated. I think alternative 3 is simpler and to the point. And because the other thought that I have is the information we don't have. I think I've been on every planning commission interview in the last interview committee, but I can't tell you how many of the applicants were residents versus non-residents to know what our applicant pool would look like if we limited and said only residents can apply. So I'm afraid that if we make a requirement like that, we're going to be back here in another year saying, oops, we don't have 7 members because we acquired residency and we can't find a resident who's willing to serve. So I would advocate for alternative 3. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Mayor. Is alternative 3 going to then reduce the planning commission membership by 2 people? Do those 2 people that don't live in the city limits reside in the urban growth area?
We may need to find that out so that an amendment to 3 would be to add the language about current members could continue to serve if they're not residents of our.
I would support that.
City manager.
The one thing you got to keep in mind is that we will have the recruitment process as well. And the intent of that is to develop that pool that will of residents or not that would be qualified for those boards when those seats become vacant. So that's the intent of the process that the city clerk and the team is developing.
Other questions / quasi discussion? I've been guilty of that one too this time. There's no other questions. Does anyone want to make a motion? Well, that's why we need to get a motion on the floor and see if there's what's alternative there's support for.
I was gonna make Martin pulled it down, Derek. You pulled it down again.
I'll be okay with the rest of them.
Gotta go back to the alternatives. They're talking about alternatives.
Were there questions on the other sections other than this provision on the planning commission?
Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion for alternative one. Require that at least 5 members reside within Mill Creek. No more than 2 may reside outside Mill Creek. However, the 2 must reside within the Mill Creek Municipal Urban Growth Area.
Well, let's do it this way. Let's get the motion for the ordinance on the, what does the ordinance as drafted provide, Grant? Which, does it reflect any of
No,
these?
it has a placeholder for one of the, I have listed all 3 of the alternatives in the ordinance, and we'll just have to
Okay.
make the final ordinance consistent with what the council chooses tonight.
So let's make let's get the ordinance on the table. And get a motion a second, and then someone can make a motion for an alternative.
In Mayor, if I could also say this, which is to the extent that there's interest in any amendment to any of these alternatives, we could, if the council chooses to amend it to, for instance, add the language to either alternative 1 or alternative 3 that we have an alternative 2 about current members, we could revise the ordinance, bring it back, and you could even address it on your consent calendar if that's the last item to be done. So we can just take direction and bring it back to you as well.
And I want to withdraw that motion until I have answer to a question. Does alternative 1, does that boot any existing member now off the panel?
Yes.
All right, then I withdraw my motion.
Let me back up. We don't know if the two are in the Muga or if they're outside of.
They're outside, they're outside the Muga.
Both of them are?
Yes.
Okay, so it would boot both of them.
So only 2 to keep them on. Oh.
No, oh, yes, correct. As those alternatives are currently written.
If we were to alter alternative 1 to say require all 7 members to be Mill Creek residents.
Can you talk in the microphone?
Yes, I can.
Alternative 1.
Alternative 2.
3.
Alternative 2, require all 7 members to be Mill Creek residents, or using down alternative 3, or within the Mill Creek Municipal Urban Growth Area. If we made that one change, that sentence, first sentence in alternative 2, I think that allows us to keep the 2 folks and have the broader area.
Say that again.
I'm trying. Require all 7 members to be Mill Creek residents or reside within the Mill Creek Municipal Urban Growth Area.
You're inserting that into.
Correct. Correct.
I think that could create a potential where all 7 don't live in the city, but they live in the urban growth area.
That's true. Yep.
Well, let's get the motion for the ordinance on the table, and then let's throw out get some motions for amendments for the alternatives and discuss it that way. So if someone makes a motion.
Oh, I think we need the motion back. Move to adopt an ordinance amending chapters 4.02, 4.10, 4.18, 4.26, and 4.30 of the Mill Creek Municipal Code and establishing the effective date. And is this what choosing alternative 2?
No, the motion would be just to advance the motion, because the motion has all 3 written into it, and then someone can make a motion for one specific alternative. So all the motion just be as it's written up there.
Okay, fine. Move to adopt an ordinance amending chapters 4.02, 4.10, 4.18, 4.26, and 4.30 of the Mill Creek Municipal Code and establishing an effective date.
Second.
So now do we do the motion?
Now you can make a motion for one of the alternatives.
Move to adopt alternative 2.
Martin, can I read those one more time,
Is
please?
there a is there a second?
Yeah, we got a second on the motion.
No, not a second on the motion for the amendment.
Oh, we have another.
I got it. I would second with the alternative to amendment.
Can we get, yeah, can we get the slide back up that has the 3 alternatives? Okay, discussion.
I want it to be Mill Creek residents. Like I said before, I am not in favor of going out to the Muga, and I think that allowing the current members on there that are not Mill Creek residents to stay and grandfathering them in is the best practice.
I'm not going to support alternative 2. I would support alternative 3 with the language added that wouldn't kick off the current members. And the reason is this, regardless of what this says in alternative 3, we can always give the interview committee direction that we want one of the considerations to be whether or not a resident of Mill Creek or not, or a resident of the Muga. So we'll always have that ability to take that into account. I'm just concerned that we're going to tie our hands with our selection and ability to find candidates if we mandate that they're residents, when we can do that under alternative 3 as one of the criteria that the council directs the interview committee to apply when they're interviewing and making their recommendation.
But we wouldn't be able to tell the committee to give them direction to how we want to massage this if it were in the posting of the position that they could be from the Muga.
That's right. We could still have people apply, but that doesn't mean we have to recommend that they be selected. That's my point. This just gives us the option to consider both. Ultimately, the interview committee will interview them, make a recommendation. And if all the candidates are not Mill Creek residents or residents of the Muga, the council, if there's a will, the majority can reject the recommendation of the committee.
Mayor, I would support your comment on alternative 3.
Well, we have a motion on the table, so that we've got to discuss it. Have
Well, I'm having a
discussion.
discussion on that.
I'm sorry?
I'm just having a discussion on it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, my discussion is, I'm not in
You
favor.
don't support the motion.
I'm not in favor of alternative 2 either. But I did like the idea of alternative 3 with the caveat of adding the language of any current member all the way through filed by Mill Creek residents added to alternative 3. I do like that.
Councilmember, oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine.
Councilmember Duque?
Oh, I just had a question about where we were. Did we need to second the amendment?
No, the amendment was seconded. I forgot who seconded it.
Okay, was
Councilmember,
it?
Mayor
That-
Cavalieri did.
There we go.
Hang in there, Vince. Hang in there.
Did you, oh, that was your question. Okay. So the motion on the table is to adopt alternative. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Councilmember Cavalieri.
So just for council's consideration, essentially all 7, and I'm just thinking down the road, all 7 members could live in southeastern Linwood.
No, the
Yes.
southeastern Linwood is not part of the Mill Creek Municipal Growth Area.
That side of I-5, isn't that part of our Muga?
No.
This side of I-5, out to the power lines on the east, south to about 180th, 192nd, some places, and north to 128th, 132nd.
Right.
So not on the other side of the highway, but Linwood has a disputed area, but we
Right.
go all the way to I-5.
Currently, someone in Linwood could serve on our planning commission. Okay, is there any, so the motion on the table is alternative 2, correct? Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to adopt alternative 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
A.
Nay. Abstentions? The motion passes. So the motion now on the table is the main motion with alternative 2.
Second.
No.
Oh, sorry.
It's already on the table. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on the main motion as amended?
Well, just for conversation's sake, I think alternative two creates a great, I guess I'd use the word hybrid of everybody's intentions here and doesn't really disrupt what exists.
I think it does disrupt what we exist because we've tied our hands to get potential candidates to serve, and we've put ourselves in a position that if we have a vacancy and no Mill Creek residents apply, we're stuck not having a full planning commission. So we face this right now with a vacancy coming up. So, and it also ties our hands in terms of the quality of candidates. I mean, all of you have sat on interview committees. Great of volunteers as we get, there's some people that you see just aren't the people you think you ought to select. And you're now telling the council that you're limiting your choice to potentially unqualified candidate or someone you don't think should serve that's going to get appointed because they're a Mill Creek resident over someone else who has more qualifications. So I'm not going to be supporting the motion because of alternative two, but any other discussion? No, is that a question?
I'm confused. I think we just voted on alternative two.
We did, but now we're back to the main motion, which to adopt the ordinance with alternative two.
Sorry.
So that's the motion that's on the table in front of us. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Nay. Abstentions? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, thank you, Grant. Thank you, Martin. Now,
Solid waste.
talk solid waste.
Yay!
Wait, I'm waiting all night for this.
We get a little crazy when it gets almost 9 o'clock.
You got my. Below you take. Kind of late. So that just, I didn't get tested. I didn't give me that. I didn't get my tested that late.
Okay, so last week we talked about the different options. We asked council to give us some inputs, and so I've got a recap of the inputs I received from many of you, and we can talk some more tonight about what else we should put in there. So the kind of things what I heard from you last week and heard through emails, and I'll just run through these and then we can talk about them as my suggestion. So generally people were happy with their current supplier. Didn't hear a lot of people saying, I really want to change to a new one. One comment was about maintaining all three services. Remember, we talked about cost. It might be cost less if we alternated compost and recycling, but I had one person who mentioned 3 services every week. And I think that might be a consensus, but we can check back on that. Comment about value, really not driven solely by cost, but the value. And when we're deciding about value for the contract, include the staff time and the switching costs for the community overall, not just for staff. Some talk about education and engagement, how important that was. There's a sense of we would like to have our citizens be able to minimize their footprint on the environment, but not to go after specific diversion goals. So a couple of people said those kinds of things, like we want to do the right thing for the environment, but let's not set some crazy goals that might be hard to achieve. But we figure out ways to make through education and engagement, help people do the right thing. Responsive customer service was important. We talked about that last week. We've got pretty good service now, but that's something that people want to make sure continued. And there's one discussion about putting in our contract a refund for missed week for inclement weather. Right now, our contract says 1 week for inclement weather, they'll pick up an unlimited amount the next week. And I think the comment last week was that somebody was recalling a time when there was 2. And I think our current contract, I think we probably, if we would have been on top of it and had staff to go after, we probably could have fined them or forced them to do that. But I will say I don't know exactly how that goes. We may have missed the boat on that. I don't think that happens very often, but someone did recall that happened in the past. I don't remember a lot of phone calls, but somebody might have been missed. One more page here. Another comments again from some folks and from the community as well to talk about different kinds of recycling. We've all got lots of stuff going on with plastic film right now. Kiwanis and other groups, the Rotary, et cetera, have been collecting film, and it's at the location right now. It's at the library, or it's the entrance to MCCA, and and you can go to a lot of grocery stores and recycle your plastic film, but the thought was, is there some other way to collect that? Again, keep that out of the waste stream, which is a good thing, but maybe having that for the next 10 years at the library entrance is not where people want to go. Styrofoam is an issue, it's hard to get rid of. Some other contract providers have given ways to do that to their contracts. So something we could ask about. Right now, it ends up in the, it's bulky in your trash and it ends up in a landfill. Cardboard, we've all seen with all the things through COVID, how much more cardboard is out there. If you drive through your neighborhood on whatever trash collection day is, there's a lot of cardboard next to the bin. In our environment, if that cardboard gets wet, it no longer is recyclable. It now is compost or trash. And so while our contract allows you to do that, it's probably not the best thing. So that's just something we could discuss with our provider and say, what do we want to do to keep that dry or provide some other way to collect that?
Mike, can I ask you, you
Yeah, go ahead.
made a comment that stirred a comment for me. So I forget the name of the company. We have a company that collects alternative recyclables like Ridwell, thank you. Why don't we have a contract with a provider like that? I mean, if we're talking, they collect styrofoam and things like that. So why don't we have a contract with them for serving Mill Creek?
And that might be, I think that's a good suggestion. There's other alternative providers. If you want to pay X dollars per month for Ridwell, some people have this service, not everybody knows about it, but you can pay for this extra dollars per month and they will come around and pick up stuff. It's like the old milkman milk box on your front doorstep. That comes around and picks up different things, different weeks is the way I understand it.
Yeah, just try collecting all the clamshells that Waste Management doesn't take. You'll be amazed how many clamshells you accumulate in the course of a month.
So that might be something we would set up, with our provider, if it was Waste Management, for instance, would you provide that? If not, is it allowed under the contract to have another alternative service that we'd offer to people who wanted to recycle better, but doesn't fit through the recycle stream? Remember what any of these haulers want to do is they want to take one source. We're required under the state to have one source stuff separated by trash versus recycling versus compost, but that single source recycling, all the stuff that goes in your blue cart, then they take it to the material recycling facility down in Woodinville and try to separate it back out again. And so they don't want those clamshells, even though it may be economic value in those, it's hard for them to get those back out because when they're sucking up the piece of paper, that clamshell looks like kind of like a piece of paper.
Or they don't want light bulbs or batteries or.
And those kinds of things too, yeah. Right now, people may or may not be aware, and I'm not sure how formal it is, but we do, people bring a bag of batteries to us. We put them in a 5-gallon bucket and somebody comes and collects those household batteries. I don't want to send the floodgates, but here you go. Yeah. You can take them to the county. Like a lot of people, you take your stuff to the airport road recycling center, you can take stuff there, but that's a lot of miles and a lot of fuel and a lot of, greenhouse gases generated by that. So we do collect those. We do collect fluorescent bulbs. That's a little weird too. There's been a change in terms of how retailers accept those. There used to be a program that made it so retailers weren't charged for doing that. And so now they're charged. And so when you try to take a 4-foot fluorescent tube back to Home Depot, it's not the same as it was 3 or 4 years ago. So that's again, something also we've been doing. We get to think about how do we accommodate that? Just ideas of other things that are hard to get rid of, but people want to do the right thing. And the last one, some people have these kinds of things in their contract. Ours is kind of set up to do it, but as far as I know, we've never done it. But periodically we could say, this is trash day. Anything you want to put on the curb is fine. And I think Waste Management contract or a future contract would say they will pick it up, but the city would pay for the tonnage. So everybody puts out all those old couches. That's great. They will have an extra run on a Saturday to pick up the couches, but the tonnage that results is something we would pay. So that's something that cities do. That's the idea there for large items or extra items. Right now, if you want to get rid of a couch, you can call up Waste Management and say, pick up that couch, and they will charge you $15 or whatever for that couch.
Or they go dump it on the side of the road.
Or
they go dump it on the side of the road.
Yes, yeah. There's other places. Yeah. Recycling, maybe there's things we would do about.
Councilmember Duque has a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just because that caused something me to think about. I know outside of our city limits, there's some HOAs or communities that they rent, like I can't think of the word, a dumpster. Correct. And then they'll do it. And then the HOA incurs that kind of fee. Within the city, are there any rules that would prohibit, have you heard of any HOAs within the city doing that? Or that would prohibit, because We're
I've
not the one
heard
that work with
within
them?
Mill Creek necessarily. There's
Mhm.
nothing right now in our ordinances that would prohibit it. Remember, we also have a shot at 8.04, our municipal code. We can make some changes there.
Mm,
I think the closest thing would have been Mill Creek Garage Day. On Saturday, there's been a recycling kind of event for Goodwill to be at the MCCA Country Club. They've quit doing the recycle thing because, or the Goodwill thing, because Goodwill doesn't really care to come and do it anymore.
mhm.
But I remember a number of years ago, there was some trash that ended up there and they dealt with it somehow.
I
But I'm not
gotcha.
sure they were really set up for
I
it.
gotcha. Yeah, I just wonder if there's an opportunity for.
But that could be a
an
thing. If we could find a
interest-
place to.
Not that
put
we
the
paid
dumpster.
for it, but yeah.
Yeah, so
if
we might
there's
say,
not-
oh, okay, instead of picking up at the curb, we've got a day where you come down and throw all your extra cardboard that's in your garage, break down all those Amazon boxes and break down the cardboard. We set that up. So we can
Thank
set
you.
up that kind of thing. Hazardous waste many years ago. Councilmember Michelson ran the hazardous waste thing. You could take hazardous waste up to Everett and they accept it, but it's like Monday through Thursday from 10 to 2. It's hard to do as a homeowner, but you can get rid of latex paint and motor oil and those kinds of things. Again, the right thing for the environment. We haven't done those kinds of things, but that'd be an opportunity for us to ask our contractor, would they do those kinds of things? Or would we, one of the other suggestions was we talked about last week, have a higher administrative fee to have some money to pay staff for doing this, or to coordinate with volunteers and some staff, or to have the tipping fees generated by this, or to, there's lots of different things we could do. Right now, we got the 1.5% administrative fee that brings us in about $40,000 a year. We could say, let's make that a higher number and have some resources to have staff do some more things with respect to it. So that's the total input I received from a number of you. There's some of you who may have some burning issues that you didn't get to me, and no harm, no foul there. There's other issues you'd like to talk about. I think the fundamental biggest one is to decide, and I don't think I left it in here, and I took it out. We're fairly happy with our existing provider. And one approach is to just negotiate with them, get them to sharpen their pencil and give us the very best deal. The other approach, the other traditional approach, is to go for an RFP. Here's what we want. We stop talking to everybody and they do a formal RFP process. They put something in and it's a very formal process. You really can't mix the two of them without being unfair in some ways. You picture if you gave one the opportunity to give your best and final, and they say, well, now we're going to go to somebody else. They've already put their best and final on the table. So it's kind of hard to negotiate both ways.
I think this is the exact discussion we had 2 years ago, whether to do this, and we decided that based on the relationship, we wanted to see what Waste Management WM would offer. And that they came back with something that we concluded made it worthwhile to not go with an RFP.
Yeah, last time what they did to convince us was they said, okay, here's some other recent contracts that had happened. Here's what, I can't remember what the cities were now, but this is the price, and our price came back. The price they gave us was about the same or less than other contracts. We felt pretty good about the decision we made as a council back then.
And they were a very good partner during COVID. They gave us contract extension, status quo, I believe, contract extensions. So I'm always loyal to that.
And our discussion was, as I recall, we kind of said, we asked staff, what was your drop dead date when we need to start the RFP process so that we could not create a problem by asking for Waste Management's proposals. So, I mean, I would like to do that again, like we did last time. I think it worked out for us, but I don't know what others think.
Well, I had brought up that I was concerned, although I prefer to stay with Waste Management. I don't know if we should go to a RFP to make sure we're being prudent with the dollars of the residents. But I don't know how everybody else feels about it. That was just something that I had brought up last time, because I do really like Waste Management and prefer to stay with them, but I don't know if we're missing out on a less expensive, more cost-effective alternative. So I just want to make sure I was being prudent with taxpayer dollars. Well, their dollars.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got deja vu of the fire contract 2 years ago of having this discussion. Maybe we can go out on our own. Maybe we can do X, Y, Z. My comments to Director Todd were that they've been a good partner, like I stated before. And I would prefer to go that way. I think it would be I think their numbers would probably come out similar, and we're not going to go it alone. Be very difficult. We start thinking that we are this city that's a size that it's not. When we thought we might get our own fire department, we might negotiate with these folks or join with those folks, and it just you're 22,000 people, so sit there. That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, we need to be mindful of taxpayer dollars, but at the same time, we might get some of the bids lower and they provide less service. So you tell the residents, we save you taxpayer money, but they're unhappy with the service they're getting compared to what they have now with waste management. So you're not looking for motion, you're just looking if there's a
Look for
strong.
general direction, but I think what I hear is that exploring this direct negotiation is not a bad. Nobody here is saying, let's not do that. I appreciate
I think that
Mayor
is
Pro
the
Tem
direction.
Vignal's comments, and that's my concern too. Something we can do is we can go and pay a consultant on the order of 10 or 20,000 bucks, but this is a $3 million kind of contract to say, give us some advice, somebody who does these kinds of contracts, and they might be able to help us understand what the market is right now.
Well, we could ask Waste Management to provide some comps of other cities that they serve.
And we could do that too. And I think we could look at those comps and say, what are recent contracts? What do you think it's going to be? You don't have to reveal what your offer is to us, but what's reasonable. And if we like that, then we can say, let's go ahead and finish up. If we say, not sure, we want to hear more, then maybe a consultant could help us. Ideally, I would have time to call every other city and say, what's your deal that you've got going? And frankly, we just don't have the time to do that. So paying a consultant something to do that, who's got some expertise, might be helpful. And they might know more about these other programs we're talking about here.
Councilmember Steckler.
I like where Director Todd's going. He's saying we hire the consultant to tell us what is Republic, some of the other places, what are the prices, what's the price of the market right now? So give us an idea of what is the market going for other competitors, not just Waste Management, and then see what Waste Management comes back in. If they come in the ballpark, save us all a lot of time and trouble. And they can come in the market in the right price, stay with them.
Wait, just to be clear, though, you weren't suggesting going to the consultant now. You're suggesting going to Waste Management first and then seeing what they come back with and then deciding if we want to get a consultant to look at it.
I think the consultant, though, we don't really know if the price that Waste Management's telling us is in the market until we go to a consultant. And the consultant tells us what the market is. I mean, we don't know.
I'm recalling, I'm sorry, I drew the breath in. I think what we did last time was Waste Management could come back and say, these recent contracts happened and here's what the UTC rate would be. And that was adequate for us to say, we're getting a pretty good deal. I think the mayor's suggestion now is that try that. And if they come back and say, no, we're not giving you any good numbers, then maybe we say a consultant could help us as opposed to getting the consultant wrapped up and making a big deal out of this in the first place.
Yes, let's not incur the cost unless we don't like the answer or not confident that the numbers we get back from Waste Management aren't in the ballpark of being what we want.
All right.
Councilmember Allison.
I believe the last time you came to talk to us about this, you were already into your lead time away.
Into what?
Into his lead time away. You know, like how much time is left before the negotiations need to be.
Ideally, these people would like 12 to 15 months. 15 is preferable because they might need, if it was a new provider, they might need 8 new trucks, and trucks are hard to come by. So the non-WM potential vendors have approached and said, if you don't decide pretty soon, it's going to be really hard. We're going to have to cancel our vacations and work weekends. They're not complaining. They would still love to bid on this, but they're starting to give that little bit of pressure that says we're getting to the time. Our contract expires June 30th. So we're up against that. We're within the 15 months now. We're at the
June 30th of next year.
Of 2024.
2024, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see the present provider has trucks, has carts, knows the area. The new people are going to have to really hustle to figure out how would they give us their best deal.
Would it be helpful to give direction of the amount of time, 45 days to get a response from Waste Management? Otherwise, we decide to move on with the RFP.
Something like that.
I'm sorry.
Something like that, yes.
How much time? 45 days, 30, 45, 60?
I would think that Waste Management probably would like to have 30 days themselves to figure out whatever change we might want. And there's not a lot, but I could suggest these things and talk to them about that. And they would come back and say, okay, here's what the current rates are. So that they would propose a 30 to 45 days.
Okay.
If council wants to give us staff that direction, I think that'd be reasonable.
Would that direction include getting the comps that they were gonna
And then in
provide?
the process, have
Yeah.
them help convince us that the deal they're gonna write for us would be a good deal.
Uh,
And that still gives us a whole year to deal with the
Yeah.
details of the contract, but I think we'd like to substantially know we're gonna do business with them or go somewhere else within 45 days.
City manager.
Wasn't there a green aspect to waste management's contract? The way they process the trash from a non-methane standpoint, right? Early on, but so there may be components to these new contracts with the new vendors that we're not aware of. Is it just price that you're concerned about? Is that all our communities is concerned about, or is it how they process from a clean environment standpoint as well? A lot of things have changed over the years. There are electric vehicles coming out. There are hybrid vehicles that are out. Are you sure you've considered everything? Cost is not just the only thing. But you don't even know if and you increase your risk too. What if waste management comes in too high?
Well, then we go out to RFP. I mean, in my mind, what we're saying is we're giving our WM 30 to 45 days to tell us why we shouldn't go out to an RFP.
Put your best foot forward.
I mean, is really what it is. Tell us why we shouldn't look at someone else to date.
I think that's probably reasonable. And I think that city manager point, everybody's changing things like the MRF we talk about, the materials recycling facility is a Woodinville that we have been using. It's currently closed right now because they're redoing it because economics and the environment says they're going to get some better performance out of that. Each of the providers has the same kinds of things going on. They're all trying to stay up with what the market will bear. Remember, we talked about China doesn't want our contaminated stuff anymore. So they're all working on lower contamination limits. Different people have different approaches for how they do compost. Some of the approaches are more trapping the methane. Some of them are not. That was part of that reason I put this back up, that third bullet. You're looking for value or cost, or the fifth bullet was really best efforts on diversion versus specific goals. Do you really want to go after the very cleanest compost approach that reduces methane, or are we going to go like, let's just let the free market develop that? It's the tough part of this.
We're making an assumption that the cost of all the other alternatives are going to be somewhat in the ballpark, which we don't know, do we?
We don't know. I will say for it, one data point is Kirkland was a waste management WM city. They put out for RFP and only waste management responded because it was so tough, and the other providers apparently decided they just couldn't compete. Now that was Kirkland, and I was going on that assumption 4 or 5 months ago that was probably going to be our case as well, potentially our case as well. 3 other vendors called me up and said, "Hey, what are you guys up to? We might want to bid." So they're always looking for business. I mean, that's the nature of the free market, which is great. I'm glad there's other people looking. That's what keeps it competitive for us overall. But as the city manager says, there are changes out there. And there's other vendors that might want to bid on our contract, but we don't know as much about their service because we're not as familiar with them. We don't know as much about what their best offer would be. Again, they've got some switching costs. We've got some switching costs that would be an impact on our citizens. You know, just changing your auto pay from WM to somebody else is an inconvenience for 8,000 households. It's just a little thing, but that's one little thing. And that's what we talked about, some of the switching costs.
You have the direction you need.
I think I do. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Director Todd. Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda. Item A, approval of checks number 66028 through 66073 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $165,355.46. Audit committee was the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Paddock. Were there any exceptions?
No exceptions, Mayor.
Exceptions.
And city council meeting minutes of April 25th, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Abstentions? Consent agenda is approved 7-0. City manager, your reports.
Thank you, Mayor. First report is that I have completed the Leadership Snohomish County program that started about 8 months ago. So that's, I think graduation's in June sometime. So let's see, Snow County Isle. I met with the director, Lois Langer Thompson, Snow County Isle, just to give her a quarterly update, kind of what we accomplished in the past quarter and what we're planning the next quarter. Deputy City Manager and I and the HR Manager had the opportunity to attend the conference, the Labor Relations Institute, sponsored by AWC and Summit Law in Yakima, Washington, and it was focused a lot on comp studies, labor relations negotiations, and they had a lot of other HR modules and components there that we attended as well. So it was pretty valuable learning a lot of things about PFML, FML, and so forth, and the impact that a lot of these things have in the labor market and so forth. So it was very city focused. So it was, I think it's advantageous for us to be there last week for 3 days. And the last report is that we completed the State of the Police video. So we're happy about that. And it's a move in the right direction of really pushing out there on social and in the press, the increase in presence across the city of Mill Creek and what we're doing from a safety standpoint, not just policing, but how we're going to also address safety in other areas, including how we increase safety across, for example, pedestrian type flags or things of that nature that might that have been brought up by residents. Now, these things will take some capacity at time, so we'll have to plan these through these studies that we have slated in 2024. So that's all my reports, Mayor. Thanks.
Any other staff reports?
No other staff reports.
Okay. Three quick things. I sat in on a Department of Emergency Management Advisory Board meeting today. The primary topic was the renewal of the ILA, which will be coming back to us here in the coming weeks. So we'll go into the details of that. We have city chat next Wednesday at Jackson High School on Wednesday night at 6. And the last thing is I was on the council website looking for something, and I noticed that we still reference on the website calling to make reservations to attend a city council meeting. I think we can de-COVID some of those provisions that don't apply anymore. That's all I had. Mayor Pro Tem, any report tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I have to say, well, I guess I have two things to say. I have noticed increased police presence. So I just want to say kudos on that again. And also I've got a question that I'll actually touch base with Director Todd on later, because I was running back on North Creek Trail this week, and I just have a question on like the fences and stuff, that whose responsibility they are, but I'll touch base with you about that offline. And that's it. Thanks.
Councilmember Cavalieri, any report?
No report, Mayor.
Councilmember Steckler.
Just a quick report. Sunday, the City of Mill Creek and Mill Creek Kiwanis Club had an electronic recycling event, and it was, well, a great success. Let's see, we filled a 26-foot container truck to the brim with all kinds of broken down electronics, but all full of fun, exciting components and parts and pieces. We served over 100 cars. I know because we gave out little bookmarks to each person. We ran out of bookmarks at 100. And so I know we went over 100 cars that came through, and we had to really pack that container truck because we had a backup truck, which broke, the gate broke on us. So we couldn't get any more stuff in it. So thank goodness we managed to, we really stuffed that 126 for the first one because we couldn't get anything into the second one, but that was the good news. So it was well attended, and the people were very, very responsive. And keeping to Director Todd's comments, we are in discussions about putting on another, as you know, we have in October, we have a document shredding event that the city does with the Kiwanis Club. Let the citizens get rid of all their documents. But we're talking with this other company about putting on a hazardous materials event. Because as many people don't know, I didn't know this, but you no longer can take your paint anywhere. You know, they used to pour it all together in one big container and use it to.
What kind of paint it is?
Well, any kind of paint. Used to, you know, sometimes non-latex stuff, they put it together and they would use it for graffiti coverage, but they don't do that anymore. So the only thing you can do is now add those chemicals that harden the paint. And if you don't add those chemicals, I do know that what Waste Management has little cameras when your dumpster, your little tote, your little cart thing goes over into their garbage truck. They're looking at everything you're putting in out of your tote. So if anything nasty comes in out of your tote, they know, Councilman Cavallari, that, oh, there's a can of paint that came in. So they know if anything bad comes out of your tote or your recycle bin. So there is a real need for a paint recycling event in our city. So we're hopefully going to be able to put that on hopefully this summer right away and talk to the city initially. But we just have a lot of details that need to be worked out. But that would be something really great for the city, for a lot of the citizens. So we're going to get on that right away.
Councilmember Allison, any report?
No reports.
Councilmember Duque?
Yes, I was able to attend the Mill Creek Parks and Recreation Board meeting. And it was wonderful, great conversations. I really appreciate it. And what I wanted to flag for council members is a lot of great things that the Mill Creek Youth Advisory Board does. And as they're working on recruitment for next year in their application process, we're just very lucky to have such a great group and everyone that participates on it. Also, I wanted to tell you about how it was great to listen in on the conversations about what they were working on, the prioritizing the ARPA funding and thinking through their projects that they had presented to us and really fine tuning, kind of, being realistic about what it looks like. And they said great things from staff about how you've been supportive in terms of figuring out what that looks like. So I really appreciated listening and being part of that and hearing about projects that when I was on the board, we talked about. So it was nice to see movement, and I tried not to show favoritism on anything. I think it showed though. I think it showed. And then the other thing I just wanted to flag, I'm so sorry that I won't be able to attend the recognition ceremony dinner for the Mill Creek Police Department and city staff. That's coming up. And I just wanted to, in my report, just say thanks to all of the staff and to the Mill Creek Police Department for your amazing work. And I hope you guys have a great time.
And last but not least, Councilmember Pat.
Thank you for remembering me, Mayor. Speaking of remembering things, the WRIA Salmon Recovery Council, Mike Todd, this has your name written all over it. As the liaison to this group, I use that word very generously. There was an invitation to participate in a stormwater summit hosted by King County, May 31st, 11 a.m. to 1:30. Just let me know if you'd like me to send that invite over to you and your staff, Mike, and I'll get that over there. Yeah, perfect. But I do an event that I attended and a couple of folks attended last week. The Chamber of Commerce Engage, first Wednesday Engage session. There were a couple of folks there. One, Dave Gunter, chair of the Mill Creek Rotary, and Scott Mulam, the Mill Creek sports owner. They commended, they went out of their way to commend the progress that they've seen in the city, and very specifically the engagement and responsiveness from the city manager and staff. They've noticed the cleaning up and the maintenance of the common spaces, not just Martin and I walking up and down 132nd, but all around the city. There were the ongoing concerns about some of the encampments and whatnot that Scott abuts with his business there, but wanted to shout out and say, look, you're on the right trajectory, especially if we look back on the prior years of drama, we're on the right trajectory. So I wanted to pass that along to the city. Yeah.
Thank you. Audience communication, Barb, name, address, 3 minutes.
Barb, excuse me, Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place Southeast. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. It was encouraging to hear the presentation for the Snohomish County Food and Farming Center, being that I'm an avid farmers market person. To hear sad that it's going to take so long. But I'm curious how they plan on getting the 30 to 35,000 extra money they need. Unless I missed it, that didn't seem to be addressed. And I hope it's not going to fall on local communities to have to come up with the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Will left us on the screen, so I don't see any members of the public. So Thank you again, Representative Donaghy, for not only coming tonight, but sticking out to the very end of the meeting. So,
Yeah, you got the record.
yeah.
I'm impressed.
So if there is no objection, we'll adjourn 9:23 PM. Thank you. So I think no on motion once and time.